This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, this is the Environmental Protection Commission. This is a special meeting on Wednesday, August 12th, 2020. The first piece of old business is EPC 16-2020, 281 Middlesex LLC, 281 Middlesex Road, aka 4 Holly Lane, for proposing grading activities related to a replacement house in an upland review area. Site is shown on Assessor's map. Assessor's map number 9 is lot number 68. Okay, the commission members should have a draft of this, and I believe that Mr. Millard has set minor edits.
Yes, I have those.
Okay, okay. Is there anybody else who has minor edits to send to Rich? No, no. Okay. Okay, and then I need a move to approve this letter as is what we've done in the past was to call on the vice chairman, Jim Millard, and then Susan McKenzie's not here, so I'll be calling on Guna for a second as we go through these. So, Jim, can I have a second to move this?
You mean to propose that we adopt the conditional approval letter for 281
Yes.
Middlesex Road? Yes, I'd like to put that forward.
Okay, Guna, second?
Okay, I second it.
Great. All in favor, or can I say without objection, Rich?
Without objection.
Without objection, so moved. Okay, the next piece of business is EPC 17-2020, 7-Eleven Inc., 306 Boston Post Road, proposing site development activities related to new commercial construction in an upland review area. The site is shown on Assessor's map number 32 as lot number 9. Commission members have a draft of that. I believe, Jim, you sent out some edits.
A week or so ago, prior to our earlier scheduled meeting, to Rich.
I have those.
Okay, is there anybody else who has edits and changes? Okay.
No.
Rich, excuse me. I would like a motion to approve this letter, approve this draft. Jim, can you move that?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve that draft conditional approval as we've been discussing.
Great. One second.
Yep, I second that motion.
Great. Then without objection, so moved. Okay, moving on to new business, EPC 18-2020, Jeffrey Brown, 26 Peach Hill Road, proposing grading activities related to a replacement house in an upland review area. This site is shown on Assessor's map number 6 as lot number 129. Please, Rich.
I mentioned in my notes that this is more of a CAM situation. It is within 100 feet of Holly Pond portion of the pool, but I would recommend that you let P&Z have a hearing.
Road?
I'm sorry. This is also with a P&Z for filling and grading. That was looking at the next one. There's actually an improvement, I think, into the wetland buffer proposed, and P&Z will have a public hearing.
Okay, should we hear about it? Then the commission members can decide whether they want to just give us a
Sure.
5 minute.
Yeah, I think Doug DeVesta has that.
Yes, I'm here. Fred, can I
Hey, Doug, you mind giving us a 5 minute brief on that, and we can see what if we think we should see it, or if we can pass it to P&Z, because you're having a hearing on that, Doug?
Yes, we will be having a hearing. We're going to be submitting next week for planning and zoning for filling and grading. Okay, I'm just trying to get the green here.
Yep.
I don't see the icon yet, Brad.
Hold on.
Yeah.
You see it now?
Give me a second. Let's see. Here it is. Yeah. main screen. Share. There we go. Get that over here. Okay, is everyone see my screen? Okay. Doug DeVesta, professional engineer, representing the applicant. What we have for you tonight is a 26 Peach Hill Road. It's for a knockdown rebuild of a house. What we're looking at right now is a parcel that's around almost 3 acres. It's a rear lot. So I'm showing right now on the screen is the subdivision of the survey map. Here's Peach Hill Road. There's a common driveway that I'm following with my cursor on up. There's wetlands all along the north side of the existing driveway. It's coming up to the main body of the property. The house to the south of us was redone in 2006. So you might have seen at that point that parcel. The existing house is located in the easterly portion of the property. Property slopes from west to east, wetlands all along the easterly boundary. What the proposal is what we're doing is we're going to raise the existing house, construct a new house that's further to the west with a attached garage through a portico with 2 driveways coming off of the existing driveway to service a courtyard in front of the house, another courtyard serving the garages. With that, they're going to be putting a pool further to the west with some terraces. And then this house right now, currently, the existing house is currently on a septic system, which is located right about here. That will be abandoned, and a forced main with a grinder pump will be connected to the sanitary sewer line, which has been brought up from Peach Hill Road. The red line that you're seeing here is the upland review area. So majority of the property is outside the upland review area. We are putting a detention system in down underneath the proposed playing field. It's right now, currently, that area there is a driveway, so that will all be removed, grassed, and then a detention system will be installed there. Erosion control will consist of silk fence with double row silk fence with hay bales at the down gradient property line, or not property line, but just west of the wetlands area. Also on the call today is Bruce Eckerson, the landscape architect. I'll have him go over a little more about the planting plan, the mitigation area of the wetlands in terms of removing invasive species. So Bruce, you want to discuss your landscape plan?
I'd be happy to, Doug. Thank you. Bruce Eckerson, Principal Eckerson Design Associates, presenting tonight on behalf of the owners. We've developed a landscape plan to accompany the house and the drainage improvements. Within the upland review area, we are going to be doing some regrading to create a level play field. On the easterly side of that play field is a retaining wall. That other side, yeah, which is east of the existing driveway, which will be removed, as Doug said. Between that wall and the edge of the wetland, we are proposing to remove, excuse me, a line of mature burning bush and replant the area between the wetland line and the retaining wall for the playfield with a combination of native trees, shrubs, perennials, ferns, etc., to improve that edge and buffer the development uphill. As part of the overall site development, there are several trees to be removed, all of which are outside the upland review area. I believe we are proposing 11 trees to be removed, and we are now showing 44 new trees to be planted. We are proposing to do a little bit of evergreen screening along the southern edge of the property. That part of that screening does go into the 50-foot upland review area. Within the upland review area, we're using native American holly green giant arborvitae. We're also proposing some rail style fence, paddock fencing along the northern and southern property lines. On the southern property line, it will follow the course going east and will terminate before the wetland area. On the northern property line, we're proposing to take the fence all the way down to the easternmost corner, which is adjacent to some existing fencing on the neighbor's property over there. So that, I believe, summarizes the proposed planting.
Thank you, Bruce. So that's really the summary of the proposal. As we talked earlier, this will be going for planning and zoning for a grading and filling permit, so they will have a public hearing on the application. So is there any questions from the commission?
Going down my list here, Jim Millard?
No, very good overview. No questions, Eric. Thank you.
Gunnar?
One question, on the diagram or on the, what is just to the west of the playing field? It looks like little circles, right? Yeah, right.
These are additional trees. I think they're decorative trees in there. Bruce, you want to let us know what type of trees those are?
Yeah, that's intended to be a grove of cherry trees, ornamental cherry trees on the slope.
Okay, that was my only question. I just that looks good.
Okay. Michael Irvin?
Can you hear me, guys?
We can.
Oh, great. Okay. Hey, Doug, couple questions.
Sure.
So to the east of the demarcated wetland boundary, the upland review area boundary, where you show the storm, are those galleys? Are those proposed galleys?
Yes, they are. They're Caltech units. They're the called C4s.
Okay. And I'm sorry. Is that area actual wetland?
No, it's not.
Okay.
The wetlands are this. Blow this up a little bit for you. The wetlands line is right here where this green line is, with those triangles. That's the wetlands boundary from there to the east, to the easterly property line.
And you have tests, so I can see that you have 2 perk test holes.
2 deep test holes and 2 perk tests on each end of the drainage system.
And how did those work?
Let me show you, what do we got here?
The question is you're putting stormwater retention adjacent to a wetland. Are those going to perform? I mean, obviously.
Yes, they are.
You say they're going to perform.
We got 11.
The water?
A little slower on the one hole's a little slower there. Groundwater level modeling at 36, modeling at 33. Groundwater is at 65, and the drainage system is fairly shallow. I put the drainage system fairly shallow there. That's why I used a smaller height drainage system in there. So we actually raised this up a little bit. We were actually a little lower, raised the whole area up, because again, this is going to be, this lower portion here is going to be filled up. So we're raising the system up, so we are above the groundwater level.
So as it is, groundwater is 65 inches below grade, but you're going to fill on top of that to install the Caltech, to give the Caltech's increased area to
Correct.
infiltrate. And those Caltechs, what are they, like 24 inches deep?
No, only 8 inches deep.
Oh, they're only 8 inches deep.
That's why we're using them.
And how much are you, what's the total amount, because you're going to, understanding you're going to planning and zoning for filling and grading, how much total cubic yardage are you increasing or filling? How much are you filling?
We're filling it approximately, this corner here is at 74. Existing grade is around, I think it's around 70. I can see the numbers here. It's like around 3 feet of fill bring in that area.
And what would the total yardage be, cubic yardage be?
I don't know off the top of my head. I
Ballpark.
have to do the calculations for you.
How about dump truck, ballpark me dump trucks?
Again, I have to do some numbers to tell you for sure.
So to quote my chairman, I hate to be the mosquito that always makes the first bite here. I guess my question is, as a commission and wetlands, is I find a trend where we have these large developments. Our mission is to protect the impact to the wetlands. And all of the mechanical drainage operations are finding themselves in the upland review area. You know, is there a more prudent and feasible location and place to put this stuff? Or is everybody comfortable with this method? That's my only comment.
Well, the drainage, this whole property drains from west to east. So it's all drains in one, and all drains in that one direction. So we're not changing the flow of water, so it's still flowing in the same direction there. Is there a place to put the drainage system in another location? There might be, but again, everything is draining in one direction. So we collected all the water and brought it to one area, and then we're allowing it to go through into a wetlands area from there. So we felt that this was the most feasible area, because again, we've got this site is also, it's not served by town water, served by public or individual wells. So we have a well on this side and a well on this side here. So again, we've got to maintain a certain distance from that for the health code. So again, there's limited areas where we can put a drainage system out here. And we felt that by taking away an impervious area of the driveway, and making that a lawn area, play area, and putting drainage underneath that was the ideal spot, because it is a fairly level area that's being created in that area, and that was probably the best use of that land for us.
No, I understand that. I have no other questions.
Okay. Kelly?
No questions.
All right.
I have no questions as well.
I have a quick one. Doug, the basement,
Yes.
how deep is the basement? What's the water level around the basement?
Let's see, with the basement level, that's the one. Modeling was, no groundwater was encountered. Went down to a depth of 109 inches. Modeling was at 36 inches. The basement, I did not look at the foundation plan to depth was. I'm assuming it's going to be about 9 feet. Bruce, do you know how much raising the house up out of the ground there? Bruce?
Yeah, sorry, can you zoom in just a little bit? So
Yeah.
97, 93, so 95, 6. So we're basically through the middle of the house, Doug. You see the 96 contour at deep test hole 1.
Yep.
So the finished floor of the house is 97.75. So it's kind of balanced cut and fill. So if you go down 9 feet, basically the basement's going to be at the garage slab at 86.42.
Right. So we'll be in the groundwater, Eric, but we're also putting a curtain drain up along the westerly property line that will collect discharge from the neighboring property that drains onto this property. So we're intersecting some of the groundwater up here, bringing it down to a level spread and allow that to sheet flow down along the westerly, northerly property line there. The footing drains will again will
have a sump pump. These guys, I mean, obviously for emergencies, they'll have a sump pump, but it's not going to be going 24/7, right?
No. This won't have a sump pump. It'll be gravity fed because of the elevation difference in the property. It's being drained down into our detention system area here. Okay. So we've got that being collected there. Correct.
Okay. Okay. Rich, what should we do? Because I know I don't think we need a public hearing on this.
So, again, my feeling was that currently it's all lawn right to the edge of the wetland. Or actually it's euonymus and invasives.
Yeah.
So the net, there'll be, I think, a net positive to have some of that upland restored.
From an EPC perspective, what could be done?
I can write it approval for your review at the next meeting.
Okay. Okay, well, Rich will write up something and we'll review the draft next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, next item of business is EPC 19-2020, Rajat Gupta, 2572 Boston Post Road, proposing pool and patio construction in an upland review area. The site is shown on assessor's map number 54 as lot number 4.
Okay, Doug DeVesta, professional engineer, representing the applicant. Just give me a minute and I'll get those drawings up on the board here for you. Let's see, start off with the
Mr. Chairman, I'll just jump in real quick. As I've been absent from the prior 2 meetings, I just want to let you know that I did review both of those meetings and the materials.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, so the parcel we're looking at right now is at 2572 Boston Post Road. It's in the 130-acre zone. This house was constructed, as you see on the survey, was constructed in 2006. Driveway coming in off of Boston Post Road to the existing house. There's existing drainage on the driveway and the rear part of the property there. But the proposal is to construct a pool at the rear portion of the house. I'll pull up my plan. Oh, no. How come that came up? Okay, there we go. Right job now, right project. Okay. So what we've got here, so we have Holly Pond to the south of us, which is colored in blue here. And then we're looking at putting a pool right off the back rear terrace, going somewhat into the rear terrace area. There's a drainage system that was installed in 2006 for the front portion of the driveway. And there was one installed approximately where the existing pool was, or proposed pool is going to go. So that's going to have to get relocated a little further to the north or to the west. And then a new drainage system for the new impervious areas will also be installed to handle the water quality again, because we're in the lower reaches of the watershed along Holly Pond, looking at water quality versus water quantity. So we're proposing a detention system for the water quality from the impervious area. So again, we're looking at a new pool area here. There's a retaining wall that basically holds back the lawn area. Again, this area in here is all kind of a marshy area. The property does continue on up a little higher to an area where there are some mature trees and a little pathway that goes out that they can access Holly Pond from. So that's really what we're looking at doing for this project here. Access would be through the driveway along the westerly side of the property. There's not a lot of room there, but we have enough, smaller equipment will be used. We'll have to remove 3 trees to get the access, get the machinery and equipment down and remove material from that area to construct the pool. Matt Pop is also on here. He, landscape architect, doing the layout. So this was the alternative that we finally came up with. Let me go over and show you what we, one of the alternatives that we looked at. we actually looked at the proposal that the client really would like to have would be a pool that's perpendicular to the house itself to give a little more playing areas for his kids. But again, we felt this was getting too close to the existing retaining wall, a lot more disturbance closer to the Collie Pond. Therefore, we went back and looked at utilizing a pool that's parallel to the existing house and removing portion, and going into some of the existing terrace area. I'd like to have Matt to discuss a little more about the plan, the grading, and the mitigation plans that he's planning to do out there. Matt? Matt, are you there? I don't think Matt's on. Or is he on?
I thought, MP.
Matt is on, but his microphone is muted.
Oh. Yeah.
Matt, can you unmute yourself?
I guess he can't. So, well, basically what we're doing, he's doing some mitigation. I can't tell you the plant species and stuff like that, but he's proposing right along the retaining wall is to do some additional plantings on the north side of the existing retaining wall, just to enhance that area a little bit more. So that's really it. That's really the only landscaping portion he's doing. I think we're going to add a few more trees. We're taking away some of the trees. We're adding a few more trees up along the north side of west side of the property there. So that's really what we're doing there. Pool equipment will be placed on the next to the existing retaining wall alongside the house here. This will also be submitted to planning and zoning for CAM, because we're in the coastal area with Holly Pond, grading and filling, and flood damage prevention. So this will be going to a public hearing as well before planning and zoning, because the flood zone is coming right up through the back portion of the existing house where my cursor is here. So again, this will be going before planning and zoning as well. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Jim Millard?
I don't have any questions. I think Rich's notes and your introduction to this application, Eric, I take comfort that the scrutiny that P&Z will give this, because of coastal area management written resources, will be quite thorough, and I'm comfortable with going next step without having to do that ourselves.
Okay, Gunnar?
Yes, so that retaining wall on the southern part of the house, below where the proposed pool would be, that retaining wall.
Mm-hmm.
Was that part of it when the house was constructed? Was that put in at that point?
I
guess my question, Doug, how did that get there in the first place? I mean, is that within, is that legal there? Isn't that in the upland review area or in the?
Yeah, let me see if I have another map of the property itself, an older map.
And to Gunnar's point, is there any existing drainage going through that wall?
Well, there was, based on the original design, here it is. Original design was done by Rocco DeAndrea. And let's see what they have on this plan. This is the plan that was done in 2006. Uh, 2004, constructed in 2006. It looks like it was an existing does extend retaining wall and raise wall to elevation 9.5. So it looks like it was an existing wall there. And the drainage system, as we talked about earlier, was in the front. And then there's a piece in the back that was going through the wall back in 2004 when it was originally proposed. So there's the existing wall that was done, may have been done prior to 2004 when there was the existing house that was there when it was raised in 2004. And then the drainage was installed and went through the retaining wall there. So I think that answers your question there.
Okay, so the other question is, do they ever, well, you mentioned that the flood zone goes right up to the back of the house, is that right?
Let's see. This is yeah, it's elevation 14.
So
elevation 14 is right through here. It looks like goes around the house here. Again, this had to go before planning and zoning back in 2004 when it was approved back then, just for the fact that's in the CAM and flood damage prevention area.
So what are the chances, if we have another one of these big, storms like we get from time to time, and it's combines with a high tide, of Poly Pond, overflowing and flooding that whole thing out all the way up to the edge of the house? I know it's not something that's going to happen every year, but we get one of these big storms. It's what's going to be the impact?
Well, it's a pool, so it's not habitable space, so it can flood. And the water will just, again, if it's a pool, so it does have a little storage in there. It's just going to fill up, and then it's not going to cause any harm to the family, because again, it's not habitable space.
Hey, this is Rajat Gupta. Can I say something? I'm the owner of the house.
Okay, Raj, go ahead.
Yeah, as per previous owners, they were here during Sandy, and that they said, not even a drop of water touched our patio during the Sandy. Just to give you a little background.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
So, Doug, how high above sea level will the swimming pool be?
Well, mean high tide is at 3.29. Our pool elevation is at 12.3. 12.2 is the patio around it.
Mm-hmm.
And
how about is there going to be some kind of a, like a maintenance shed or a pump house or whatever that goes along with the swimming pool? And if so, where would that be?
The pool equipment is right here, and that's going to be above that's going to be above the 100-year flood elevation. It's right in, it's got to be within the setback areas, outside the setback area. So that's where the only place we can put it is right here, where my cursor is.
Okay. I mean, I agree that what this new proposal, I think, is a lot better than what your original one. If you turn the swimming pool 90 degrees from what you're proposing now, I think this looks a lot better because it's further away from from that retaining wall. And I was there this afternoon looking at it. It's pretty well, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of excess space there at all. I'm wondering how you're going to get your equipment down there on the west side of the house, but you say there's enough room to get equipment in there.
Right. And I believe Raj has talked to a few pool people, and they ensure him that they can get down in there. Again, removing a couple of the trees that we indicate on the plan to get the machines out and around the existing patio area to get into the rear portion of the property.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Michael Irvin?
No questions.
No questions. Kelly?
I was just curious of the type of pool. I'm assuming it's going to be saltwater.
I believe.
That is correct. That is correct.
It's saltwater. Okay, saltwater then.
And I assume, Eric and Rich, that we put contingencies on, I'm assuming it's also a gunite pool of some kind, about removal of water and how that's handled, given that it's on Holly Pond and there's chemicals even in a saltwater pool.
Typically, when someone drains a pond, pool rather, recommendations from DEP are generally that it be allowed to go across a lawn area. If there were chlorine, for instance, it would dissipate. There's much more of a concern with freshwater systems during trout breeding, which this isn't. So usually when they drain a pool, there's not much of a concern.
Saltwater pool.
Even a chlorine, even fresh chlorine, as long as you put it out over a lawn area, it dissipates very quickly. And pools today don't use anywhere near as much chlorine as they used to.
Okay, that was it.
All right.
Yeah, on Kelly's question, just a little bit further so I can understand it too. So when there's a drainage system now that goes through that stone wall or that retaining wall, would that be where this pool water would be dumped to if they were going to drain it out? Because if this case, I don't know what that's used for right now, but that would take it directly without going into the grass system.
No, I think what Rich was saying, that they pump it out onto the lawn area, not into a detention system.
Okay, well, what are those pipes that are there now on your plan that actually go through the retaining wall right now?
That's collecting the runoff. That's collecting runoff from the driveway.
Okay.
It's based on the driveway, and for the front part and the rear portion goes under a drainage system that's located in the back system, right where my cursor is right now, which will be relocated to this portion here. Which those two things, the pipe comes along the east side of the property house and also comes down, tied together, and then they go to the retaining wall.
So those are the overflow systems after
overflow from the house roof areas and the driveway area.
Okay. All right, that's all I had. Thanks.
Okay. Rich, this is going to go in front of P&Z Cam.
Correct.
Will that be a public hearing then?
Yes.
Okay, so that is a public hearing. I don't get the sense of the commission that we need a public hearing. So I guess what we'll do is you'll write a draft for us to approve.
Yep.
Okay. And then we'll do that next time. Okay. Next item is EPC 2020. Megan Thornton and Eric Romer, 49 Birch Road, proposing pool and patio construction in an upland review area. The site is shown on assessor's map number 11 as lot number 11.
I think that's Jacek.
Yes, that's me. Excuse me. Good evening, Jacek Bigoshinsky, PV Architects. And with me is Dr. Gustav, who is the engineer on this job. And he's going to pull up the plans. Or,
okay.
Yeah, Rich, if you can just give the control to Doug.
Yeah, you got it.
You have it?
I have it up.
Hold on, Doug.
I can't see it. Hold on.
Doug, you're gonna have to share your screen again. I just sent you the prompt.
Yeah, because I can't see it.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
You see it now?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So let me just take you through the general idea, and then Doc can get into maybe a little bit more nitty-gritty. So I'm sure you've been to the site. It's a lovely site, but the problem with it, there is actually a pond here and a brook that comes right through it. And when you look at the house and you look where the location of the brook and the pond is, that really makes it very, very tight to have any kind of an outdoor space. And it really divides the lot. The lot actually slopes quite a bit up here into the upper right corner or upper left corner as you look at the plan. And so what we were asked to do is find a location for a swimming pool with a small pool house and do some mitigation that will go with that. There is also a little bit of an issue here with a patio and a fireplace that was constructed without a permit. The owner tells me that there was a contractor that said, oh, everything's good, we don't need a permit for landscaping. So they went ahead, they did that. And, you know, unfortunately, we'll have to deal with this now. So the idea here is this, that that fireplace that's there is too close to the house, does not meet the code. It was not really inspected properly. So what we're proposing to do is actually take that down, just remove it totally. But we would like to keep the patio that's there, that was also built without a permit, this patio here, right there. We would like to keep it if possible, okay? And then also as part of the this application, we're proposing to move a playscape, which you see there, right there, exactly. It's located within the setback line. Playscapes that do have structures, as in something that's elevated, and there's like a little bit of a slide on it. Those should obey the setback line, so we're going to move that behind the side yard. And then also, as we move there to the left, there is a shed there that's placed, was placed by the previous owner. We don't know exactly the history behind it. It's kind of ugly. And it's also within the setback there, so we'd like to remove it. So that's, those are the three things we're going to do. Take out the fireplace, the playscape, move it, and then the shed, totally remove it. And then what we would like to do is to place a new pool there in the corner, as far back as we can. It's really right up against the setback lines. And a small 16 by 20, a pool house. The pool equipment will be there on the left side of it, sort of behind the pool house itself. And then obviously do some mitigation as part of that. So maybe Doug can take you through the engineering, and then I'll talk to a little bit about the mitigation. Unfortunately, Alex Mark, who designed the mitigation and the environmental impact report, she was available last week and she's away right now and cannot join us, but she will be available, say you decide to have a public hearing on this, say next month. So Doug, why don't you maybe take the commissioners through the engineering part? Sure.
Again, Doug DeVesta, professional engineer, represent the applicant. So to access the rear portion of the property, we have to cross this is considered the Tokenique Brook. So we have to cross that. There's an existing wooden bridge that takes your lawnmowers and your maintenance equipment across the brook to the rear portion of the property. That wooden brook bridge will be removed temporarily. Put in two twin 18-inch corrugated plastic pipes into the channel itself, and then put steel plates over that, put sandbags on the upper side and some riprap on the lower side, just during construction to channel the water through the crossing there to get the machinery to the rear portion of the property. Do a riprap, a anti-tracking pad before it gets onto the driveway, so the equipment can go off without tracking mud out onto the driveway and out into the road itself. So that will be the crossing to get the machinery back into the back of the property there. What we're proposing is a channel drain around the edge of the coping of the pool and around the future pool house, and bring that over into a detention system in the rear portion of the property here. In terms of erosion control, we'd utilize a double row silt fence with stake hay bales along the edge of the planting. There's actually a buffer area between the pond and the lawn area, so right along that area there for erosion control. They're looking, again, the pool house would have fixtures in there. So what we would do is we would put a grinder pump, injector pump in the pool house that would come across, go underneath the brook, along with any water and bringing water out there, electricity out to there, will all go underneath the brook. And we do have a detail of the brook crossing on my detail sheet of how we get across the brook there with the force main. It's something you've approved before. For example, over on Valley Road, we would construct the crossing on the upland side of the property, dig the trench across there with a 42-inch depth below the stream bed, then put the crossing back in there, and then backfill the area with the native material that came out of the brook itself. So that would be the crossing for the sanitary sewer, force main, the electrical, and the water going out to the pool in the pool house area. And I guess, and like Alex said, Jacek said that Alexandra is not available to talk about the mitigation area, but maybe Jacek can give a brief overview of that.
Yes. So can you, do you have the mitigation plan that you can bring up?
I do not have that.
Okay,
No,
so maybe, Rich, if you can give me control of the screen, I can bring that up.
Fred, you mean?
Oh, Fred,
Yep.
Fred is in, okay.
Let me get that for you, Jacek. 1 minute.
Okay. All right, can you all see it all right? So first I'm going to take you through her report. I believe you have that in the file, but it does show, and again, I'm not the expert on this, but it does show some important aspects, and you can sort of see the location of the pond here and how that pond literally divides the lot into these two pieces. And so, nothing is going to happen to the brook itself. We're not going to do anything with the pond. Everything is going to remain as is. Our construction is far enough, it's over 100 feet away from the edge of the pond to the edge of the construction. So it's not going to be really affected, and we have additional, obviously we're going to have mitigation done. So when it comes to the overall, I'm just going to glance through it because I'm sure she can tell you more about it. But the overall conclusion here is that while we have a short and long-term impacts, that those are going to be eliminated and minimized by the use of soil erosion and sediment control measures. And the loss of trees and soil disturbance will be compensated with new planting plans, which will be beneficial for the wetlands watercourse environment. And the increase of the stormwater runoff associated with the new hard surfaces will be mitigated by the proposed in-ground infiltration system. And of course, any areas disturbed during the construction activities will be restored and planted to provide permanent ground stabilization. So in her opinion, the proposed activities will not have any visible long-term impact on the regulated area, and that the native plans offered for the wetland watercourse restoration will provide a net benefit for the protected area. And this is the planting plan. So there is already here, there is a buffer here with some plants, and we're going to do, plant additional species. Shade bush, summer sweet, swamp azalea, Virginia sweetspire, some cardinal flowers, irises, and cinnamon ferns. So those are the plants that will go here along. There's about 120 different items here. Questions?
Jim Millard?
Eric, can you come back to me? I'm formulating a question in my head.
Okay, well, Jim, I think one of the issues is that I think we want to go to public hearing on this. And so, if you have a question, great. But otherwise, you'll get a second opportunity. When's our next meeting, Rich? September 2. So don't worry about, you'll get your chance.
Will there be a
Okay,
peer review on this application?
Gunnar?
You're putting a lot of faith in Jim's memory to wait for that public hearing, but I'm sure he's up to it. Sorry, Jim. So I was over there this afternoon, and as you walk across that little wooden footbridge, there was looked like a little water course that comes down into the pond.
Over here?
It looked like, well, right underneath that wooden bridge, but I didn't see any water in there, so, which was kind of surprising, or almost really no water. I thought maybe there would be, but so my question is that normally, like, is that little stream flood out, or is it if we get a lot of rain or one of these storms, is that?
If the water comes through, it does fill up here, and during heavy rain, but it goes through very fast. And so what I was told is that the pond kind of acts as a buffer here, fills up, water comes up a little bit, but it never really floods out, like onto the patio or next to the house. The house never flooded. So it goes really fast. You can see how narrow this is. So because of the sort of narrow profile, the water just gushes through there very, very fast. And then it ends up in this kind of a pond, buffer. And so there is water there now, but the brook does dry out. It's not a very, I don't know, a year-round brook that has water in it all the time.
Okay. So I guess it would be on the southern end of that pond. I couldn't get over there to really look at it, but is there a drainage, or where does the water go from the pond?
It comes through these, yeah. Doug, you want to say something?
Yeah, there's two spillways. There's two spillways. Yasik, I'm pointing the two spillways out.
Right.
So there's two spillways there on the south side there and to the other side there. They come together, and you can't see it because there's a fence on the southern property line there. But peeking over that fence, it just goes into another brook. It just continues on down south. That parallels basically Birch Road all the way down towards the Post Road there. So it just meanders through there. So it just continues on down to another stream.
Okay, is that it's funny, I've never noticed that stream, but does that go all the way down to like where that 7-Eleven project is down on the Post Road?
No.
I think this may feed into to Cherry Park.
It feeds into eventually Tokenique Brook and then into Scotts Cove.
Okay.
Ultimately,
If you know the marsh, which is to the east of Tokenique School,
Yeah.
okay, it feeds that, okay, and then you can track it north of there. Okay, so that's the Tokenique Brook.
All right, so I guess the other thing, that pool house and the stone patio by the pool, between the pool and all that stuff, how much impervious area are you guys creating? I guess I could add up the numbers, but
Just bear with me for a second here.
Well, Doug is looking for it. Here is that brook, just to show you how it actually feeds. And where the water goes down, goes through another lake or another pond, and it keeps going.
The cherry pond.
Keeps going. Under 95. Keeps going. I think I just made a U-turn. Where's it go? Oh, okay, yeah, it does actually. It goes up and around, and it just keeps going, keeps going. All right, finally, Long Island Sound.
So is that little stone patio on the west side of the pool, is that within the setbacks?
This little stone patio, 16 by 16?
Yes.
Yes, it is within the setback line. The setback line is right here. It's not more than 4 feet high. It's right on the ground. So I believe it can actually go into a setback line.
How about for the future pool house, the 16 by 20 little pool house?
Right.
That going to be within the, is that?
That's behind the setback line. It's not on the.
Is that encroaching on the wetlands?
No, it's in the upland view area. The wetlands are down
here.
Right.
I saw the pink flags and they were in the ground, but it's kind of hard to tell exactly, what the limits of them were.
Well, it's like this here, from the edge of the pond to the corner of the proposed pool, we have 48 feet. Here we have from the edge of the pond to the corner of the pool house, 42 feet. The limits of wetlands is here. And so not within wetlands, it's within the upland review area, by about 2 feet here and about 8 feet, on this corner.
Okay, I'm sure as Eric said, it'll get going over in the P&Z public hearing, so that I don't have any other questions.
Well, I think we're going to have a public hearing on this.
Oh, okay.
We're going to have, I will propose after everybody's finishing their initial comments, I will propose to have a public hearing, but, EPC, and then we'll go from there. And then if there's a P&Z meeting.
No, they won't.
For grading and filling, no?
No.
Okay. That's why we will have one. Okay. That was Gunnar. Michael Urban.
My only question is, will this be a peer review application?
It could be. I didn't consider it in terms of the drainage, you mean? Normally I would have Darren review. Could be a peer review, but normally it would be, I had thought it would be for Darren to review.
My initial thought is there's quite a few moving parts here that I think it would be beneficial for a peer review.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that okay, Rich?
Yeah, it might delay the hearing. That's okay.
Okay. Yeah, because it is the 12th.
It might be hard to.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Michael. We'll suggest a peer review on that one. Hey, do you have anything else? Michael, do you have anything else?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Kelly?
Yeah, I had a question on the terrace and the fireplace that was built without a permit. Is that in the wetland?
Oh, it's in the upland review area. We did issue a notice that it's not in violation. Normally we give people some time to figure out whether they want to ask to keep it. Honestly, I could have treated this possibly as an agent approval. But what triggered the town going out there was the fireplace. Actually, it does not meet building code and it cannot meet zoning. So the fireplace definitely has to go. And it's just whether you want to permit the terrace after the fact as part of this application. So the answer, I guess the short answer is they could have come to you with an application for just the terrace.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's something we'll we'll have to debate in the public hearing.
Rich, for the building code piece, how does it not conform to building code?
Oh, it's not tall, it's too close to the building and not tall enough to,
Had proper
not
draw.
tall enough to be away
Yeah.
from the roof. That's my understanding.
Yeah, it's-
Mike
it's-
Beatty from the building department was out there and he made that determination. But it's kind of a moot point because it doesn't meet zoning code. So there was no point in them asking for a zoning application and building permit because it doesn't meet the setback.
Exactly, because it's a structure, it has to obey the setback line, and you can see here's the setback line, and actually it's right outside of the setback. Plus, it is too close, and it was not inspected, so the CO would never be issued for that fireplace. So the owner has agreed to actually remove it.
Yes, and replace it with a terrace.
No, it would just be removed.
Just remove, period, and be grass or something.
Be right back to lawn, yes.
Okay. Okay, Kelly, does that,
That answers my question. Thank you.
Bill, right?
I have no questions, thanks.
Okay. I think there's a consensus we should go to public hearing on this. And Jim Millard, I would appreciate if you could move that we send this to public hearings.
I'd be happy to do that, Eric. I propose to remove EPC 20, the application of EPC 20, 2020 to an EPC public hearing to be held when Rich schedules it.
Okay, Gunnar, is that a second?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay, and, without objection, I'll call for a public hearing then. Okay, Rich, it's up to you to schedule.
Yes, well, it'll be September 2nd. I'm looking for a peer review. It's going to take a little time. I'm away next week. I'll mention it to Jeremy. He can maybe get in touch with somebody, but
Push it along, yeah.
it might not be fair to somebody to have comments before the second. So what you could do is open the hearing if you don't have comments.
Okay.
Continue it, but I will schedule the hearing.
But you're here for
The hearing. Yes.
The normal regular meeting.
Yes.
Okay. That's it for this one.
Thank you.
Let's move to the public hearing. EPC 05-2020, Joe Pagarillo, 49 Sunswick Road, proposing a 2-lot subdivision and related house construction, septic field construction, and filling and grading within an upland review area. The site is shown on assessor's map number 62 as lot number 25 and 28. This public hearing is continued from July 1. Okay, Rich, we've had a series of memos that have come through. Who do you think should start the public hearing then?
I think,
Trinkos?
yeah, I think Attorney Kaufman is representing the applicant. I think I'd see what she would like to do in terms of presentation.
I guess, okay, you just put on your video.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, good evening. I'm happy to start the presentation when you're ready for me.
Ma'am, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jackie Kaufman. I'm an attorney with Carmody Torrance, Sandak and Hennessy at 707 Summer Street in Stamford. And I'm here tonight on behalf of the Orsmans in pursuit of their request to subdivide their property into 2 residential lots. I know you've had quite a bit of background on this, and I have just recently become involved. And in the interest of bringing some clarity to the record tonight, I would like to just review a little bit as to where we are. I was, as I mentioned, recently invited to join the development team, and they are all here with us tonight. And we've spent the last several weeks since the last public hearing in conversations with staff, with Ty and Bond, with Mr. Canis, and tried to be as responsive as possible to commission comments that have been received, referral comments, comments from Ty and Bond, and also to be responsive to the neighbor questions and observation raised by Mr. Trinkus. But most importantly tonight, I want to summarize for you that the plans that this team has put forth and the refinements and revisions that we will review with you tonight are all in satisfaction of the Connecticut the Connecticut statutes and 10.2 of your regulations. So the consultants that are here with us tonight, Joe Pagliarulo of Palladian Builders, Doug DeVesta, our civil engineer from DeVesta Civil Engineering Associates, Inc., Jay Fain, soil scientist, arborist, and certified professional in erosion and sediment control. Matt Pop, our wetland and soil scientist and landscape architect with Environmental Land Solutions, LLC. Jeff McDougall from William W. Seymour and Associates, our surveyor, and also my associate, Jay Klein. Collectively, we will hope to answer all of your questions and close the hearing tonight. But if I can for a few minutes, go back and review the scope of this proposal. 49 is a double size, more than double size corner lot. It's 2.59 acres in the R1 zone. That's a 1 acre residential zone. It's located here, as you can see, on the west side of Sunswick Road. Its existing improvements include a single family dwelling, driveway, detached garage, otherwise surrounded by wood, lawn, and other landscaped areas. The property is bordered all around by residential developments. It's on all sides. And the general topo, which you can see if you look very closely here, includes a rocky ridge, and it runs from the north to the south, and it sheds water in that direction into the site's 2 wetlands, one in the southwest corner and one in the southeast elevation. And as I speak to these things, I can see that Doug is working his magic on the board there. So you can follow along with his cursor. What you see here in front of you is the site plan. We propose to subdivide this into 2 lots, 2 valid zoning lots. The existing house and garage will be removed and replaced with 2 dwellings and 2 modest-sized swimming pools. And you'll note that the improvements are consistent with the existing improvements. There are 2 buildings there now, and 2 buildings will be proposed for the future. Both homes are served by public water and on-site septic systems. Lot 1 includes more disturbance than Lot 2. That's really what brings us to you tonight and is the crux of our discussion. It includes work in the upland review area, and that's removing the garage, building the new home, earthwork for the new septic system, removal of approximately 11 trees, and a small portion you can see of the septic field and stormwater infiltrator is in that regulated area, and then there's some related grading and site work. Lot 2 remains almost completely outside of the upland review wetland area. Only 1,210 square feet of grading and wall construction is proposed here. This means that any construction disturbance on Lot 2 will revert back to a naturalized woody state when everything is completed. So we think that is a positive for this development. But as previously reported by Mr. Pop in prior testimony and in his submission materials, the upland review area will be replanted with native trees and shrubs, and a complete planting mitigation plan has been proposed and submitted to you. And as previously reported as well by Mr. DeVesta, the drainage design goals here is really to manage the post-development peak rate runoff to be equal or less than the pre-development peak runoff, as well as the volume of runoff to be changed. We think that this has been demonstrated and achieved. So I'm going to turn this over right now to Mr. DeVesta. He can review some of this design criteria with you, and I'd like him to share with you some of the changes we've made in the last few weeks. Really up until Monday, we would have had all this to you last week. We were diligently working Tuesday when we all lost power. And I do want to thank you for convening so quickly. It's really meant a lot to this applicant who has been at this project now for almost 8 months. So thank you for not delaying until September. Doug, would you like to start, take it from here?
Sure, Jackie. For the record, Doug DeVesta, professional engineer, represent the applicant. As Jackie mentioned, we've done some modifications since the last meeting. One of the main things we did was there's questions about the footing drain water, where's it going, how much water are we going to be pumping out, things like that. So we had discussions amongst ourselves. We checked with our surveyor to make sure we have the height of the buildings are not going to violate any zoning regulations. So we found that we can raise the height of the buildings to get them higher out of the ground, and the basements won't be so deep into the groundwater area and/or rock. So we raised the house about 1.5 feet from the first floor elevation, about 1.5 feet on both lots. So that raises the house up. Therefore, what we did is that adjusted the contours around the proposed contours around the house. That also affected the drainage. So we raised the drainage up a little bit as well. So we feel that it's a good compromise to get this house up higher out of the potential groundwater and or rock in both places there. So again, we adjusted the drainage system in the front. The rear, we didn't adjust at all. Just the front detention system, we adjusted the elevation of it relative to the new grades around the house. We added caps on the ends of all the detention systems for access points for the maintenance of the drainage system. We also conducted deep perk tests in the detention areas. One was done on the rear lot. One was done up on the lot number 2. And we did one at the front detention system, but it wasn't quite deep enough. According to, if you've read Joe Kennis's letter there, we were out there yesterday and we hand dug a test hole and a perk test in the drainage area. As you can see, you'll see it in red here. We didn't have time to get this onto your plan, but we did put a new test hole right in here, down 46 inches, ran a perk at 46 inches below grade. Found we had, some miscellaneous fill, then a darker brown loamy material, and then a red-brown silty loam down to 46 inches. So we felt it has very good soils. The perks actually ran very well in that area. So again, we felt that we met all the requirements of the various comments from the town's peer review and the neighbors' peer review as well. We added a note that the fill material that's going to be on the southeast portion of the system should follow the note number 13 in our general notes there about it being type of material that's going to be used there. That was one question that came up. And then we revised the detail for the level spreaders and added on the note on the detail to add soil on each end of the level spreader. So if it does get out of the lip of the level spreader gets out of whack, it won't go around the outside of it. And also we added a operations and maintenance plan that will indicate that these level spreaders on lot 1 and on lot 2 would need to be inspected twice a year to make sure that lip on the level spreaders are maintained level so we don't get any concentrated flow. That was one of the comments that we had from the review. I believe that is it. Let me just double check my notes here. Yes, Jackie, that's all the changes that were made and that were submitted to the town for public record.
Okay, great, thank you. And I know that Mr. Canis is on with us too. We think we've had meaningful conversations with him. We've satisfied all of his comments, and in fact, and we'll get to this in a moment, there's one more recommendation he had made about ways to manage the fill with a particular retaining wall or some other means that may be preferable. So we've thought through those. We'll speak to that in a minute, and we can offer you propose a condition that may be satisfactory. But really, I think what all this, to summarize all of this, what it really shows you is that we are representing a very sensitive and complete application. I know this application was originally filed in the late winter and has been through a few rounds of review with Mr. Canis, with staff, and with your commission. And we think we've responded to all of those. And in reviewing this application, as with any other, this commission is required to consider a specific number of factors. There's 6 factors set forth in Connecticut General Statutes 22A41 and reiterated in section 10.2, criteria for design of your regulations in which you base your decisions. And if you'd indulge me, I'd like to go through those with you because I don't know that those have been articulated yet for this record. Letter A, the environmental impact of the proposed regulated activity on wetlands and watercourses. Really here, this proposal has been designed to mitigate any potential impacts altogether. Both lots have included a comprehensive stormwater management system comprised of various BMPs, and those include 1, a collection and treatment of runoff at the source. 2, they provide deep sumps in the stormwater collection structures. 3, performing scour holes. 4, installing subsurface detention systems. 5, installing hoods on outlet pipes from the stormwater collection structures to retain floatables within the stormwater collection structures. And 6, utilizing the level spreader that Doug just referenced. The applicant has also provided a maintenance plan for all these systems on both lots to make sure that they function appropriately and they're manageable well into the future for both lots. And as Mr. Canis concludes in his July 30th memo, the proposed septic systems meet the requirements of the health code, and that these are, quote from his letter, sufficient to demonstrate that there would be no unreasonable harm or pollution of the wetlands. The Darien Health Department has agreed with its referral. And in that same letter report, Time Bond also notes that, quote, the post-development runoff volumes will be less than the pre-development runoff volumes. This means that the applicant is introducing improvement to water conditions. The stormwater drainage system is designed to address water quality and peak flows from the site, as well as volume of runoff. The proposed devices are sized to capture and infiltrate the water quality volume, then meter out the remaining stormwater, all to ensure that the post-development peak flows are less than or equal to pre-development volumes. In addition, the mitigation planting plan calls for replanting of all the disturbed buffer areas. I mentioned that earlier. The replanted vegetated buffer area includes dozens of native species and will continue to function as a filter strip. And that's very important because that further protects the wetlands and upland review area. B, the applicant's purpose for and any feasible and prudent alternatives to the proposed regulated activity, which alternatives would cause less or no environmental impact to wetlands or watercourses. There really is no feasible and prudent alternative which causes less impact to the wetlands or regulated areas here. But the proposed development has been sensitively mitigated, and those mitigation efforts, which I just summarized, have been submitted to ensure that the proposal before you has no adverse impact on these areas. C, the relationship between short-term and long-term impacts of the proposed regulated activity on wetlands or watercourses, and the maintenance and enhancement of long-term productivity of such wetlands and watercourses. Again, the proposed regulated activity will not cause any long-term impacts. As I just mentioned, we filed a maintenance plan for stormwater systems located on both lots. And this plan is not only enough to protect the wetlands areas over the long term, but it's accessible in that it can be utilized by future property owners, maintained easily, and that's a very valuable thing. Maintenance steps called for in this plan include specifically removing sediment in the catch basin sump every 6 months, conducting an annual inspection of the subsurface detention systems, and inspecting the level spreader every 6 months and after the winter freeze and thaw cycle to maintain that maintenance. So these are some self-regulating opportunities for the future owners. So these and other measures included in these plans will ensure the long-term viability of the wetland areas. D is a long standard. It's the irreversible and irretrievable loss of wetlands and watercourse resources, which would be caused by the proposed regulated activity and the measures that.
Excuse me, Attorney Kaufman.
Yes.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
You just came up with a series of inspections that, and a series of, that are going to be, that you're suggesting be required every 6 months, et cetera. Who do you propose is going to do that?
The owners, the future owners of the properties would be required to do those, and that's part of our plan. And if you approve this, you are approving all of the plans and the maintenance programs that we're proposing. You certainly can make it a condition of approval that future ownership be required to meet those and report back to EPC staff.
I'm sorry, you broke up there, ma'am. Would you kindly repeat that?
I'm sorry. This is a plan that we've already proposed, and you can adopt that as part of your findings and even require as a condition of approval that a future owner be required to adhere to it and report back to EPC staff on a yearly basis.
Okay.
So in response to D, it's again I don't mean to be a broken record, but I think for the thoroughness of this record, it's the same maintenance measures that have been proposed will avoid irreversible and irretrievable loss of wetlands. And rather than foreclosing a future ability to protect, enhance, or restore these resources, the proposed planting plan will protect them and enhance the planting area now. Standard E, the character and degree of injury to or interference with safety, health, or the reasonable use of property which is caused or threatened by the proposed activity. I think our neighbors have brought up a lot of information and have speculated that perhaps this is something that we can't meet. But as we've summarized, both myself and Mr. DeVesta, both in this hearing and in prior, and when you look at the plans and all the mitigation activity or the mitigation proposal before you, there will be none. There will be none. This is a very, very thoughtfully designed program before you. And F are the impacts of the proposed regulated activities, again, on wetlands or watercourses outside the area which the activity is proposed. And we've certainly looked at that. We have reviewed already. Any potential impacts have been and will continue to be mitigated. The plans have been modified and refined to address all of the comments, specifically those two from Mr. Kennis, in response to these governing standards. We've heard no evidence yet that the proposal will cause any specific or actual harm to wetlands or watercourses outside the area for which the activity is proposed. And in repeated cases from the Connecticut Supreme Court and the appellate courts, they have held that a wetlands commission may not deny an application based on speculative risks raised by others. A mere worry, for instance, is not substantial evidence. A denial would have to be based in substantial evidence and on more than just a perception that something might actually occur. There are a few cases I'd like to cite to Lord Family of Windsor, LLC. Again, it's a Connecticut appellate case. Avalon Bay Communities, Inc., the Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Agencies. A defendant could not there assume that the entry of sediment and siltation would adversely affect the wetlands or watercourse without specific data, without evidence that it would be so. And another great case, Riverbend Associates, or Three Level Corp. Again, these are both Connecticut Supreme Court cases, where an opponent articulated concerns or critiques of an applicant's activities, but didn't identify specific or actual harm that was likely to occur, would not be enough for the court to overturn an approval of a proposal. I'm talking here about the substantial evidence rule to support an affirmative finding of harm or potential harm to wetlands or watercourses. These cases don't, mind you, they don't obviate the applicant's burden of submitting enough evidence to prove compliance with the regulatory standards. And we believe that we have already done that. In this case, this team has put together extensive and repeated efforts to demonstrate not only feasibility of the plans, but longevity of the plans, mitigation efforts. They've revised, refined the plans, been responsive to every detail. None of the evidence that's been offered by our opponents or their experts really amount to more than assumptions or speculation. As I mentioned in the 3-level Corp case, that's a 2014 case out of Reading. The commission denied the plaintiff's application for harmful impacts and for lack of information. The court held here that the first reason for denial was legally inadequate because the commission's experts had only rendered opinions to the effect that some of the harm was likely to result from proposed regulated activities. They did not satisfy that substantial evidence test. As I mentioned, it's not something that can be met by a general statement by an expert that some type of adverse impact is likely to result. It has to be something concrete. The evidence has to be sufficient to sustain an agency finding and a substantial basis in fact. So we think that we have provided you that substantial evidence to show that the standards of the general statutes and 10.2 are satisfied. Our engineer, our wetland scientists, our soil scientists have all endorsed, and your engineer has also endorsed this proposal. Jason, would you mind referencing the condition? There's some additional work that we can do in response to Mr. Trinkus's last comment of his recent letter. And in speaking with our team today, we would like to offer a condition that for your consideration. Jason, would you read that into the record for me?
Sure. Jay Klein of Carmody Law for the record. This is in response to, I think, Mr. Canis's concern about potential slope issues if we raise the residences, and we propose the following condition. To facilitate raising the finished floor level of the residence on Lot 1, and in response to the Teagan Bond referral letter of August 3rd, 2020, the applicant shall provide a detail of the method to achieve stable slopes adjacent to the regulated wetland resource. Slope stabilization can be mechanical or vegetated means. Examples include a field stone wall, placed boulders, revetment interspersed with plantings, or slope stabilization blankets, Final plans are subject to approval of EPC staff prior to the issuance of a building permit. I can send the specific verbiage to Rich as well in the chat.
Thank you. So back to our standards, Mr. Trinkus has told you what may happen, what could happen. And these have been based on a number of assumptions and hypotheticals. But this is exactly the type of evidence that the appellate court in 3 levels found to be insufficient to meet the substantial evidence test. Where there, as I mentioned, it was based on evidence concerning what would likely happen, based again on hypothetical situations. He's also spent a good amount of time explaining how the proposal doesn't meet standards which are simply not applicable or irrelevant to this project. And I think this is particularly true of the nitrogen discharge evaluations that he's provided to you. So I have conferred with Mr. DeVesta and with Mr. Fain at length, and I'd like to respond to those now on behalf of our team. Certainly any technical questions that you have, stop me, and I will invite our team members to respond to those questions. Number 1, nitrogen levels. Mr. Trinkus' standards are not based in fact. There are 2 components to load, the concentration and the flow. And this is why this analysis is only required for large projects. And that means flows that exceed 7,500 gallons a day. Low flows will have low loads. So his statement that the nitrogen levels exceeding this will have an impact on wetlands at 10 milligram a load is just simply not based in fact. As I've said before, he bases his analysis on assumed standards, and in this case, assumed permeability. To do the analysis that he's suggested he's done, to do this properly, you have to access the site to collect soil samples and perform the analysis. If he's done this, he's done it without our permission and is trespass. He's also assuming that there is select fill, such as sand, all the way to the property line. And in fact, there's only 5 feet of select fill sand. And we can point to this. Maybe you want to point to this area for me, Doug. 5 feet of burn material here, right, which has a percolation rate between 1 inch in 15 to 25 minutes. And then there's common fill for the final grading. None of this was taken into consideration when he made his assumptions. Thus, even though he claims his analysis is conservative, his conclusions are based on incomplete data. So to us, they are suspect, and we would hope to you they are something that is not relied on. Again, this is not the standard. And so by law, it should not be reasonably relied on by the commission as more than an assumption. 3, state health code. The state health code is very conservative, and it's that way for a reason, because it's there to protect the public health. The pollution renovation analysis and travel times are baked into this code. And so the preparation, review, and approval of the SSDS design forms the basis of local health department approvals. The fact that the local approval authority has indicated preliminary approval for the system on lot 1 confirms that the system will meet state health code. So it's just a distraction, this comment by Mr. Trinkus. So in reviewing these comments, and when we went out to the site, our team went one step further. We contacted the Department of Public Health directly. We submitted this exchange into the record for you. It was drafted by Matthew Pollock, PERS, Sanitary Engineer, Environmental Engineering Program, Department of Public Health, Hartford. His opinion is as follows. Dear Doug, I am responding to your recent inquiry regarding our department's position on nitrogen discharge evaluations for properties served by an on-site subsurface sewage disposal system with design flows less than 7,500 gallons per day. Our department currently has no requirements for evaluating nitrogen discharges from on-site subsurface sewage disposal systems. Our department recommends that if a certain town or jurisdiction wishes to implement such a requirement, that they do so through the adoption of a local ordinance rather than randomly to individual properties. So again, this is an incorrect standard being applied here. We have a residential standard that needs to be applied. We've applied it, it's accurate, and it conforms to your regulations as written. 4, tidal wetlands. Mr. Trinkus incorrectly refers to the on-site wetlands as tidal environments. And he points to the potential for increased nitrogen loads to adversely affect tidal wetlands grasses. The on-site and adjacent wetlands here are not tidal. If these wetlands were tidal wetlands, the application would not even be before you, and that's because they are not subject to local regulation. The wetlands on this site are freshwater wetlands. They're predominantly classified as forested wetlands. As you can see in the March 20th letter from Mr. Pop, which is very, very comprehensive and helpful, here the dominant overstory trees are red maples, and the understory generally sparse. And to that, again, we just think that error needs to be taken into consideration, and we think that comment is therefore relevant. Finally, pollutant loading. Mr. Trinkus is using a threshold level. This gets very technical here, of 10 milligrams a load of nitrogen as the basis for concluding that this level of pollutant loading will impact the receiving wetland, based on his description that the wetlands, again, are tidal and that the excess nitrogen will adversely affect grasses in tidal environments. But again, he's just wrong about this. His description and evaluation of the on-site and adjacent wetlands, he doesn't justify or substantiate in any way, in engineering or scientific verbiage, that exceeding this threshold will adversely impact the wetland. To the contrary, freshwater wetlands are scientifically recognized for their ability to absorb and transform nutrients, and this improves water quality. So in the case of nitrogen, the primary renovation mechanisms would be degentrification, which occurs primarily in, I'm going to say, anaerobic environments, and sequestration. In denitrification, nitrite is returned into the atmosphere. So Mr. Fain can answer any more questions you have about this, but we wanted that to be clear on the record. There are also 8 other properties, dwellings within the general vicinity here. They all have septic systems, including our neighbor, and that could be adding nitrogen to Untitled Environment 2. But it's not this proposal. This proposal alone is not going to achieve that. Further, Mr. Trinkus hasn't provided any calculations to back up his claim that we can review, and therefore we do not think that provides you with any substantial evidence to rely on. So based on all of these points, it's the professional opinion of the applicant's engineer, soil scientist, and environmental scientist that the statement by Mr. Trinkus that he makes in his letter, quote, which is, "It is my professional opinion, based on the data provided below, that the proposed sewage disposal system on Lot 1 will cause an adverse environmental impact to the down gradient wetlands by increasing the nitrogen load directed to it," end quote. It's completely without factual basis. It can't be supported by a preponderance of the evidence or through the hearing record that I've seen. And therefore it should not be taken into consideration. It is nothing more than speculation. It's not engineering or scientific fact, and does not meet the substantial evidence rule under Connecticut law. Lastly, we've had the chance to review images and video of the provided by our neighbors and of a pipe spouting water. And they've taken the position that this pipe is somehow has been intentionally left off the plan with the intent to mislead the commission. I know this has been addressed in the past, and I would trust that you know that this is untrue. We have a team of experts before you who are held in high regard in this town, and this was simply a regretful oversight. But we've corrected it and we investigated in good faith. But this is a drainage pipe, and it's not draining into wetland soil. Per Mr. Fain and Mr. Pop, this soil does not meet the state definition of wetland soil. It is therefore not a regulated area. And they can certainly speak to that more if you like. The water also is coming from two different properties across the street. It's really not near the proposed development at all. Based on the grading here too, it really can't cause any harm. It's the two catch basins from the entrance of the driveway and Sunswick Road, and which is the runoff really from the road and areas off of the road. It's not something that will be detrimental to the proposal that's before you. So with that, I don't know if either Doug or Jay Fain or Matt Pop have anything further to add to our presentation.
I don't, Jackie.
Thank you. So really just in response to the comments you heard at your last public hearing and the supplemental materials, it's very clear to us that the only acceptable mitigation effort by us for our neighbors is no change. But unfortunately, that's not a standard either. Sensitive mitigation efforts have been put forth. They've been extensive. And we think you have a great plan before you. We think that it is acceptable based on the standards and is completely supported in law. So we're happy to take any questions from the commission.
Okay. Thank you for joining our commission on August 12th. The public hearing was opened up on March 6th, as I recall.
Yes.
And we've been going on it for
We started in June, pretty much. This is the third, right?
Well, we had it in May, June.
No, June was the first.
May. I was there.
Anything?
And so I'm sorry, I'm arguing with my staff. And so anyway, what I'd like to hear, honestly, is to go to Mr. Kennison and Mr. Trinkhouse. Okay, because obviously we've just, there's a lot of water that's passed under this bridge. And so what we'd like to do is to get to those two gentlemen.
Sure.
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Trinkhouse, would you like to speak?
Yes, I would. Thank you. My name is Stephen Trinkus. I'm a licensed professional engineer both in Connecticut, Massachusetts. I've been licensed as a PE since 1988 here in Connecticut, and Maryland since 2017. To just go over, I think the primary concern is the septic system. Contrary to Matt Pollock, there's ample historical precedent with the State Department of Health with using a hydraulic analysis to evaluate the effectiveness of a leaching system. Back in 1994, when the minimum leaching system spread calculation came out, that's when it was required by the code. There was a provision in there that if you could not meet the minimum length, say you had a flat lot, which is generally where there was problematic, you could do a DEP analysis to show that hydraulically a shorter length than the required minimum length, would work. And so there is precedent to look at using the DEP analysis for the groundwater mound, for the bacteria travel time, for nitrogen dilution, all the way back to 1994 in the code. My concern with the septic system is not with regard to the septic per se, but the potential adverse impacts to the downgradient wetlands and watercourses. This nitrogen analysis and bacteria analysis has been used in other communities, New Hartford being one of them, for development, or I should say redevelopment of cottages along West Hill Pond, which is a very pristine water body in the northwest corner of the town. People often come in to tear down a 400 square foot cottage and want to do a 4,000 square foot house on roughly half an acre or maybe a little larger. And many of the septic systems are downhill of the house, between the house and the lake. And the town has requested this analysis. And in many cases, it has shown that the nitrogen and bacteria, the length of time, or I should say the distance between the septic and the lake is inadequate to renovate the bacteria. And also that there's not enough drainage area to dilute the nitrogen to the 10 milligrams per liter, which is the drinking water standard. Contrary to Attorney Kaufman, in my letter, I did provide numerical evidence of the nitrogen watershed, and this is taking it from Mr. DeVesta's plans, looking at the existing and proposed contours and defining the area of the property that would drain across the septic system. That is the only area that you're allowed to consider for nitrogen dilution. It doesn't matter what the soils are. It's simply a dilution calculation of the available drainage area, your design flows, and it's a simple formula that can actually be taken from the DEP manual and used in Excel instead of by doing it by hand. But the bottom line is that both at the property line and the downgradient wetlands line, you're not close to 10 milligrams per liter. You're around 15 to 16 milligrams per liter. Additionally, even though there's only 5 feet of select fill downhill of the system, what is called berm material needs to be relatively well draining because the effluent is moving through that for treatment. So it cannot be a hard pan material because you effectively build a bathtub wall downhill of your septic system, and that compromises the ability of the effluent to disperse into the underlying soil. Years ago in the early 90s, when I worked for a firm in Georgetown, we investigated a system where a berm was made out of hard pan downhill of the fill limit, and basically it filled up the sand above it and then broke out the top. So the downgradient fill has to be permeable enough to allow the movement of effluent through it. And again, sand and gravel tends to be a lot more permeable than, native soil, but it's still, a question as to whether the bacteria are adequately renovated downhill of this system before it gets into the wetland boundary. Also, I did not state that this wetland was tidal. I made the point that nitrogen can affect wetland grasses in tidal environments. I did not say this was tidal, for the record. This ultimately does drain to a tidal area, so nitrogen should be a concern in any of the coastal environments, no matter where you are, if you're on the sound or if you're back from it. But if you're draining towards it, it is a cumulative impact. If we take the logical argument here that, well, this is just one new house, yeah, but when you've got 100 new houses or 100 new septic systems all draining there, cumulative impacts become apparent over time in our coastal environment. And this is one of the concerns, and this is why it needs to be evaluated at this time. In light of some of the comments that were made during Attorney Kaufman's presentation, some questions come to my mind is, we've heard about maintenance of the stormwater system. Well, how does the town ensure that the homeowner is going to do all of this maintenance? One of the historical problems with underground detention systems is that they are exactly that. They are underground, they are out of sight, out of mind. And while the first homeowner may do his required maintenance initially, it tends to fall by the wayside, and future homeowners may not even know these systems, quite honestly, are there. And then they get lack of maintenance. This has been an ongoing issue in many, many places where the underground detention is a commercial site. You generally have a landlord that is maintaining the entire site, and these systems do get maintained better. On residential, it's been a mixed bag historically, and this goes back into the early 90s as being a pretty substantial issue. Mr. DeVester talked about fill material downhill of the rear Caltech system. What I did not hear is what is the type of fill material, so that's a question. Regarding the front system, again, Doug stated they dug a handhole down 46 inches, which is pretty impressive because that's a tough depth to dig by hand in most places in Connecticut. But the question I have is, what is the separation distance between the bottom of the Caltech system to the bottom of the test pit? You know, I only got power back yesterday after just short of 7 days, but I did not have time to do a detailed review. And as Doug pointed out, you know, the new deep test hole or hand hole and perk test were just done yesterday, so I have not had that opportunity to review that information. I don't believe, and Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but you still only have the 6-inch cleanouts on the Caltech systems. There's no manhole access. Is that correct? Would be another question. Because if it's only 6 inches as an inspection port, the question is, if the homeowner doesn't maintain his gutters and you get leafy debris washing into the system, how are you going to clean it out through a 6-inch hole only at either end of the Caltech system? They're not very accessible through that. Regarding the treatment systems, you know, catch basins, even with a hooded outlet, remove about 5% of total suspended solids. The hood is designed to trap oils and floatables on top, but primarily they're designed to trap oils and grease that might drip off your car and then get washed into the system. However, that grease layer, if you want to call it that, or is oil film on the water, that's, once it's in the catch basin, that's not something the homeowner can clean out. That becomes a hazardous waste and has to be taken out by a company that's licensed to remove the hazardous waste, i.e. the oil on the water surface. So that is not something the homeowner is going to be capable of maintaining and has to be done by an outside a firm that's qualified to do that. You know, there is a large, and I will say it's an ongoing debate about the use of percolation tests and infiltration tests. Nobody has actually really compared the two. Michigan Stormwater Manual has some information in there, but the primary difference is the perk test measures horizontal and vertical movement into soil, whereas the double ring infiltration test is simply measuring vertical infiltration rate, and that's the basis that we use for the design of infiltrative stormwater practices. Whilst, because the bottom of the system is going to fill up first, that's your primary infiltrative surface. While the system may fill up over time, just like a septic trench would, you'd begin to get a little bit of infiltration in the moving laterally, depending on the topography, but it is not the primary driver of it. And again, the perk tests do overestimate the vertical infiltration rate. So you're looking at a much better scenario than reality as far as that goes with the systems. I did review the drainage manual that's online for the town of Darien. It was, I guess, put up in 2003. Infiltration practices are discussed in section 9.6, but there was no section actually describing Caltech systems. There was a section about dry wells, but a dry well is generally a round structure that's perforated with crushed stone around it. They tend to be 4 to 8 foot in diameter and can be equally as tall as the diameter or shorter. But it's interesting that the manual calls out a 24-inch separation from the bottom of an infiltration practice to groundwater, not 12 inches. So I guess one of my questions would be if the engineering department for the town of Darien has changed some of the standards from those that are in the manual, then, the manual really needs to be updated so that, it's consistent with what their verbal policy may be. But for compliance with the manual, if that is your document, I know Doug has previously said there's a 12-inch separation, but the manual is very clear that it says 24 inches. So in that case, it would not be in compliance with the 2003 Darien Stormwater Manual. Regarding the level spreader, I heard Doug's response of doing earth berms on either end of it. But the question is, let's say this, 4x4 beam or whatever size it is, does, get banged ground by frost. And that's not an unlikely occurrence in New England. Who's going to fix it to make sure it's dead level? Again, stormwater management systems all require maintenance, and many homeowners, it is above their heads for it. Many landscape contractors who maintain homes in high-end areas such as Darien, they're great at mowing the lawn, putting, the mulch in the beds and weeding, etc. But also a lot of them don't know anything about these stormwater practices. So maintenance of these systems becomes a large concern for that. Regarding feasible and prudent alternatives, this has been thrown out for years from my cutting my teeth in land use in Reading, which was on the forefront of upland review areas, going back into the early 1980s for that. A no-build alternative is a feasible and prudent alternative under the law. So, you have an existing development here, you have a single family house on a large parcel, leaving it as such is an appropriate thing to do. So that there is an alternative here. Smaller houses with less intense development is also an option here. This is an awful lot. The site, as I previously stated in my initial letter, is really pretty marginal for this scale of development. The fact that you've got to really cram everything in, and I don't use that term lightly, that the septic systems require a substantial amount of fill because you don't have 4 foot to ledge, you do have more than 2 foot, which is the code requirement. And, the gallery systems, everything's shoehorned in here. Smaller houses where everything is pulled farther from the wetlands is also another viable alternative with regard to that. But it is, and it remains my professional opinion that the septic system on lot 1, will discharge, pollutants, i.e. bacteria and viruses, over the wetland area and are not being adequately attenuated. Additionally, the nitrogen is not being attenuated at the wetland boundary. That is a concern. I'm not, discussing the, effectiveness of a particular septic system here, but we're looking at the environmental impact of the septic system on a wetland resource. Thank you.
Okay, Rich, you want to go to Doug Connors?
I guess that makes sense, yeah.
Okay, thank you. For the record, my name is Joseph Canis. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. I was retained by the Environmental Protection Commission to do the stormwater management and sediment and erosion control review of the application. I visited the site back on March 17th. I issued letters on March 27th and April 8th. And my most recent letter was dated July 29th, 2010. And in that letter, I discussed some of the previous comments made by both Mr. DeVesta and Mr. Trinkus, and in order to help clarify matters for the commission. So I'm going to go over my July 29th letter. I think that's probably the best place to start. And in general, I found that the comments centered around two pieces of the proposed development, the septic system and the stormwater management system. So with respect to the septic system, there were a number of comments, concerns that Mr. Trinkus made about nitrogen dilution and other pollutants. So what I did was I looked at the state health code, and I also did some additional research, trying to dig deeper into the regulations and some of the thinking behind them. And I'll actually work backwards in my letter on page 4, where I talk about the bacteria. The state DPH design manual for small septic systems also notes that the separation distance required by the health code are very conservative for coliform bacteria, but are based on the possibility of disease transmission by viruses contaminating the groundwater. So since the project does meet those separation distances, I'm not concerned that there would be an undue impact. It would be consistent with every other septic system that's built in the state under these regulations. In terms of phosphorus, they actually become insoluble very quickly within the first foot or two of soil, so it's unlikely that they're mobilized and moved into the downstream wetlands. So the bigger one is the nutrient analysis for nitrogen. And I spent a lot of time looking at this, and essentially what happens is for systems that are over 7,500 gallons a day, they're regulated by the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. And as a result, those larger systems, they do require a nutrient removal analysis. For the smaller systems, less than 7,500 gallons a day, those don't require the analysis. And so I did a little bit more digging to find out why. And this is just quoting from their design manual from 1998. There are many other nitrogen sources in the environment which will also contribute nitrates to the groundwater, such as fertilizers, rotting vegetation, and the atmosphere itself. For this reason, it is not usually practical or necessary to try to design small subsurface sewage disposal systems for nitrate removal. An exception to this might be in heavily developed lakeside property, where nitrates from subsurface sewage disposal systems could be a significant source of nitrate fertilization of the lake water, which would cause undesirable algae blooms. So in reading this, my thinking is that this isn't a heavily developed lakeside property. They're thinking more along the lines of Bantam Lake or Lake Candlewood up in New Fairfield, where the lots are really tiny and the houses back right up onto the lake. So in this instance, it's my professional opinion that since those separation distances are adhered to, that we should be following the state health code and following their guidance. Does the commission have any questions on the septic before I move on to the stormwater?
No, why don't you move on to stormwater?
All right, I'll move on to stormwater. So there were a number of comments related to operations and maintenance plans for the stormwater. I know the commission also has concerns about stormwater maintenance. And so I'll start there. And Mr. Trinkus had some very good points about the operation and maintenance plans. And Mr. DeVesta did update his operation and maintenance plan. I will say that the stormwater management systems will lose their effectiveness if they're not maintained and will ultimately fail. So maintenance is key. And as Attorney Kaufman said, the commission could require that the applicant, the property owner, report back to them. That could be a condition of approval. Other conditions I've worked with in working in other municipalities with their MS4 programs, their stormwater management programs, is instead of burdening the commission with all these additional reports coming to them, require the owner to maintain records of maintenance on site and with the stipulation that they produce them upon request. That way, the requirement to maintain the record stays with the property owner, but you have the right to have the property owner produce those upon request. So that's one potential means. And that's the unfortunate part. These systems, they do require maintenance, otherwise they'll fail, but everything in the built environment requires some sort of maintenance. So that's just something to keep in mind. The Caltech inspection access, I made some additional comments about inspection ports. based on Mr. Trinkus's comments, as well as some comments on the elevation of the overflow grates. I believe those have been incorporated. The next one is the pretreatment of flow. Mr. Trinkus had some concerns with pretreatment of runoff directed into the proposed Caltech systems. The reason why you want to pre-treat runoff is to try to capture as much debris as possible before it washes into the system, because if you have debris washing into the system, it could cause them to clog, and obviously that would reduce their ability, their effectiveness. The Darien manual does allow a catch basin sump. Mr. DeVesta has provided 2 in series to help make it easier for the homeowner to maintain, because the 4-foot depth would be too deep. So he has put them in series. I think that would go a long way. We want to encourage maintenance of these things, and the easier they are to maintain, the more likely they are to be maintained. One of the things I also wanted to mention about that is, there is a certain depth, it's 4 feet, so he's providing 2 in series. The other thing also with the pretreatment is a lot of these stormwater management regulations, they're written in thinking about larger commercial sites. I think there's a tendency for people to be more respectful of their own property versus a large commercial site. You're not going to have that same debris loading. So I'm comfortable with the arrangement that Mr. DeVesta is proposing. I think it's a good addition to the plans. The next comment was about the water quality volume. Essentially, the water quality volume is the first inch of runoff from a storm. So if you imagine, like right now, it hasn't rained for a while. You get dust and slowly accumulating on paved surfaces. It comes and rains. That first inch is really the dirtiest part of the storm, because anything that falls after that is pretty much washed off. So the water quality volume, Mr. Trinkus had some comments. I did have some questions about how Mr. DeVesta computed the water quality volume that he said he was providing on the project. He did clarify that. So I believe he has met that requirement. There was also a question about the groundwater recharge volume computations. Groundwater recharge is basically if you have an impervious site, you reduce the ability of the ground to absorb rainfall. It goes off as runoff. So this is an attempt to try to recapture some of that rainfall that would have been absorbed by the ground as opposed to being running off the land. I reviewed the calculations, and this is actually not required because the underlying soil type is actually hydrologic soil group D, based on the NRCS web soil survey, meaning it has the least infiltrative capacity. So that's why there's no groundwater recharge volume requirement on this particular location. It also reinforces the reason why we do these soil tests to see what the percolation and infiltration rates are. So that brings me to the next subject, was determination of infiltration rates. I did review the Darien manual. I know Mr. Trinkus made a lot of observations regarding the 2004 Stormwater Quality Manual, and I think at some point as part of the town's MS4 program, those will be evaluated. There are some challenges that apply specifically to Darien with regards to water separation from the bottom of an infiltration system. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail further down in my presentation, but the manual is pretty clear. It does allow percolation rates. So when I review these, I have to review them by the standards that exist, not that the standards that other jurisdictions have, but the ones that are applicable to Darien. So the percolation rates are what has been historically accepted. It's what's in the manual. So based on that, the applicant does meet that criteria. The separation distance, the 2003 Stormwater Management Manual, Mr. Trinkus is correct, specifies a 24-inch minimum separation, but that's for critical areas, for aquifer protection areas and along beaches. It's actually not specified for other areas, but historically 12 inches has been what has been used in the past by the commission. And given that, and since the manual is silent in what areas outside of critical areas, will I believe that 12 inches is acceptable. I did have a comment about the location of the proposed pool. That does conflict, but I think it's pretty easy. You can slide in any direction, so that could just be a condition of approval.
I'm sorry, Joe. Could you repeat that, please?
Okay, for the pool. Yeah, I'm sorry. I turned away from my speaker here. For the proposed pool, yes, that it is right now as it is shown. I agree, it is too close to that proposed Caltech system, but I do see that it could be. I don't see anything preventing it from being moved to the northwest on here. So that could be, I believe, as a condition of approval. By moving it, it's not really going to change the runoff patterns. It's not going to change the amount of impervious surface. So I think that could be moved. Next is the sump pump and the footing drains. I had some comments.
Excuse me, Joe. Yeah. This is Eric. When you say move can mean six inches to somebody and 10 feet to somebody else. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking you probably want to get it. That corner is probably, I would say at least as deep as the depth of that Caltech system. I'm thinking probably on the order of 6 to 8 feet. More would be better. But maybe Mr. DeVesta and his team could say, how much they could move that. That would help clarify things.
Joe,
all right,
Rich Jacobson. You said earlier you said a condition of approval, but would that mean 8 feet would be adequate? I
would believe that would be adequate. I think I believe that's deeper than the system, so that would be adequate. Yeah.
So instead of 6, we could say 8.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So next, I have I discussed the sump pump and the footing drains. I had some concerns with those also. Mr. DeVesta has moved those up. I think that's going to be tremendously helpful. It'll reduce the sump pump load. As somebody whose own basement at home has water issues, the higher you can go, the better. And he's pretty much done the maximum based on the height requirements. So that was a definite positive change to the plans. The level spreader, I understand Mr. Trinkus' comment. It could move, which would result in the concentration of stormwater. Fortunately, the level spreader is more visible. So if it is concentrating and causing erosion, it could be taken care of pretty quickly. You're going to recognize that. And there's going to be more of a awareness of it, just because it is on the property and it would affect the property owner as well. It would affect them first. They would see these signs of erosion on their property first. Mr. Trinkus had a good point that it should be included in the maintenance plan, which Mr. DeVesta included. Finally, for stormwater, there was a comment about runoff volume. Based on the calculations presented by Mr. DeVesta, I believe that it conforms to the town Darien zoning regulations. He's showing a net reduction in runoff as well as a net reduction in volume. So based on that information, the calculations do support compliance with the regulations. So that's a summary of my July 29th letter. At this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission has.
Okay, I'll open up to the commission members. Jim?
Eric, I'm happy to start with a question that's been kind of on my mind since Rich forwarded the package, and I really appreciate all the experts' input and time, including Mr. Canis's walkthrough of his July 29th letter just now. And the one thing that's been on my mind and has been was touched on by Attorney Kaufman. It was touched on tonight by Doug DeVesta when he was speaking to Mr. Trinkus, and now again with Mr. Canis. I feel good that I was on the same wavelength with these experts in the field. And that really is this question, and maybe it's a question for Rich Jacobson, because it's been quite clear throughout our public hearings and review of the materials for this project and application, Rich, that the maintenance of the system, many have pointed out that some of the access points are too small. It has to be, done on a regular basis. My question really is, and I think it was touched on earlier, that who keeps the calendar for the town or our staff that points out or sends a reminder, email, letter, text, blast to this homeowner and future homeowners? Okay, you do it on every 6 months. There's got to be maintenance of this system to ensure it functions into the long term. I come from a background with extensive commercial property management, maintenance, and overview of, enormous systems with very, very detailed maintenance on every piece of equipment, pump, anything you can think of. But I don't ever remember seeing anything of the detail we were used to in our commercial settings for a homeowner. How do we protect the environment here if this application's approved with the proper and necessary maintenance, and who keeps the calendar? How is it enforced? That's my question. Sorry to be so long-winded.
I understand. We don't have a calendar per se. We do put the drainage maintenance on the land records, that it's required of future owners, so they're aware. So in terms of the answer, do future owners, are they aware of it? And the answer is they are obligated to be. As far as the we don't have a calendar per se, but in terms of the maintenance, we would be able to require somebody to show that they've been maintaining. I think this may be probably the most detailed drainage maintenance program we've seen on this project. It is possible we could require them to have maintenance records that they would need to produce.
I thought that was a good suggestion myself. I heard it earlier, Rich, as you point out, that without burdening you, your staff, or the commission.
I think we could do that now. We could specifically start making that a condition. I hadn't heard that specifically from other towns.
I thought that it sounded good to me. I have no idea how Eric or the rest of the commissioners feel, but
to be honest, if we didn't have these systems, there would be no development in town. So this project, isn't unique that it would have a maintenance plan. We do have them on other projects. They are in the land records.
The question is, we're putting a speed limit in with no enforcement. And we're saying you can go 25 miles an hour down the road, but there's no cop.
But
okay, so the person can go, well, and I don't think that's speculation, but because very clearly the town's not prepared to go out and say, Mr. Millard, your record for maintenance is required in 30 days. Doesn't happen that way. I don't know of any town that has. I don't know of any town that has that.
I
Also,
realize,
I mean, I believe that.
I realize that,
Attorney
but
Kaufman?
I'm sorry.
If I may add to that, although I see this more frequently with regard to conditions that are placed at a planning and zoning level, and it may be a condition that you put in your EPC approval and that is adopted as, you know, at a future level 2 of review. But it has been very effective for landscape maintenance. I think a good comparison is a landscape maintenance approval agreement, where if landscaping fails, it is a requirement for it to be reinstalled. Certainly, it has been a requirement of certain clubs within the community to respond on a regular basis, on a yearly basis, and the burden is on the applicant to complete it, and the property owner to complete it. So I know clubs do have to respond to planning and zoning with a series of special events that they're going to have, and that's a traffic mitigation effort. Drainage maintenance, landscape maintenance plans, we often see these recorded on the land records. They become part of the title. So it is something that a future homeowner is aware of. And there can be specific conditions that are baked into that based on each application. It is a responsibility of a property owner. Certainly can be something that with ease can be put into a tickler system in the calendar, in the town's calendar, or in owner's calendar. But it has been very effective and something that has been implemented not only in Darien, but also in other communities. And there usually is a penalty or a fine imposed, and then there's a series of informational paragraphs about potential litigation if and that the owner would have to. It can be as detailed as one wants it to be. I've worked on these in the past with planning and zoning staff in Darien, and we've done it without issue. I think that it would be a useful condition here, and one that a property owner could manage.
No, I understand the property owner could manage, but isn't that speculation?
Yes, I've seen it. I've seen it managed. I don't know who this future property owner will be, if they'll be as responsible as people I have represented in the past, but I have not, in my time in bringing these applications forth in Darien, where we put drainage maintenance agreements on the land records, ever seen them violated. I've done this also frequently in other communities where there is a requirement, and as Mr. Canis mentioned, sometimes those requirements, I've seen this in Stanford and in Norwalk as well, that it is a requirement to maintain the records and that they are produced at the request of the town. Or it can be that the town can come out to see it every 6 months, or that the applicant has to provide documentation to the town. And when that's not provided, there's a penalty, there's a fee, a fine.
And as a follow-up, this is Joe Canis for the record. The town is registered under the state of Connecticut DEP's MS4 general permit, which governs municipal stormwater. And year 5 of the permit requires towns to start building an inventory of new systems, of new stormwater management systems within their jurisdiction. So that could be the start of a database, so you know where these systems are, and it would be up to the town. There's no requirement to send out a reminder, but it could be just like the form of an informational flyer that's it could be sent townwide, posted on the town website. There's some educational components there as well, just to build an awareness. But ultimately, as Mr. Jacobson said, since they're filed on the land records, the homeowner is obligated to perform maintenance, and it's really just a matter of trying to encourage that awareness to help foster that responsibility where these systems are being maintained.
Eric, can I just respond to those two things? I believe I'm hearing through Attorney Kaufman's thoughts and reactions to maybe my question or the whole discussion here, a willingness on the part of this applicant to do just what we're describing, number one. Number two, I hear Mr. Canis saying maybe there are other communities that have a database, a tickler system. Maybe we haven't instituted one here yet in Darien, but there's a part of me that in looking at this application and it's the careful review that it's receiving, it seems incumbent on me anyway, this one single commissioner, that we have been provided an opportunity to build that database, tickler system, reminder system for this, not only this and the protection of the environment and the downstream property owners and wetlands, but for other applications we're going to see in the future. And, you know, maybe it's a little more work for Rich and his team, perhaps a little more for our team, but I think at the end of the day, we're coming out with a better product.
Well, as Joe is talking about the town having to gradually implement more of the MS or the requirements and so on, that it would be something that both Public Works and Planning and Zoning will start developing. Yeah, but if it starts with this project, that's.
Well, I'm just concerned. I'm just concerned that we'll find out that the thing wasn't maintained through the negligence of the owner when the downstream person or the property owner gets, suffers the consequences. So that's my concern. I don't know if I'm speculating, but that's a concern.
Yeah, it's speculating.
That's a concern, and I guess the only remedy to that is for the downstream owner to sue to sue that homeowner to say, hey, you're not maintaining my things and you're flooding my property.
The purpose of the agreement would be to have, there are terms that they would actually just go and make a complaint formally to the town, and there would be enforcement action through the town staff first. So there are belts and suspenders there. It wouldn't be incumbent on a neighboring property owner to have to take it directly to court.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Eric.
Okay. Gunnar, did you have anything?
Before we jump off, hey, Eric, can I ask one more question?
Please, Jim.
I believe in our prior hearing a month ago, maybe even the one 2 months ago, there is the intent by the applicant to achieve what they're after here. Maybe that's changed if we're elevating the houses, as I heard tonight, but to do some measure of blasting to get this accomplished. Is that still the intent of Mr. DeVesta or whoever would know?
Doug, would you please respond to that?
Sure. Yeah, Jim, there will be some blasting that's required. Blasting will fall under the planning and zoning, which when we go to planning and zoning, that will fall under their jurisdiction. And blasting falls under the jurisdiction of the fire marshal. So then the fire marshal have to, the permit has to be pulled off by a reputable and licensed blaster and go through all their steps there. So yes, it will come up in the planning and zoning commission meetings.
All right, sorry to tread where I don't belong, but just to add a light moment, when I was an 18-year-old kid in a summer job helping to build houses in the Catskill Mountains, there had to be some blasting to create some areas, and it was not pretty. It was not pretty. So I wanted to be really pretty on this job.
Okay, Eric, that's not speculation.
Eric, I got a couple of questions. So Joe Canis mentioned, or you asked him how far the proposed pool on lot, I guess it's lot on lot one, how far that would have to be moved? What was the recommendation on how far that should be moved? I know it's only proposed, but what is he said 8 feet? Is that, do we make that a condition?
Yes, he said 8 feet.
And yes, that becomes a condition.
How about?
Can I make a comment? Can I make a comment about that? It's when Joe says 8 feet, in which direction was Joe speaking? If he's speaking going into a northern direction, from the septic tank to the edge of the water, the pool has to be 25 feet away. So we'll not be able to go in that direction. We can go closer to the house, or maybe possibly locating it on the other side of the drainage system, or a different shape of the pool, something like that. So yeah, it cannot be moved to the north because there's a state health code requirement of 25 feet from the septic tank and the pool itself.
Okay.
Okay. Well, looks like we have a conundrum then, because Joe says that it must be a certain distance from the Caltech, and you're saying it can't be moved north.
Septic can't be moved, Doug? Septic tank?
Yeah, the tanks can be moved. I mean, that we can work. I mean, we can work it out, but based on the plan that we have right here in front of you right now, we would have to relocate the septic tanks to a different location, which can be done. I'm not saying it can't be done. So yes, we can move the tanks to a new location, and move the pool to the north, the 8 feet that Joe was talking about. So yes, it can be done.
Okay.
Now, if they move the septic fields,
Tank.
The tanks.
Does that come in front of us?
No, it's just tanks. No, it's not in your review area.
It's a pump system, so we can pump almost anywhere relative to the state health code.
Okay, the other question, do you have any leeway to move the whole house further away from the review area and or make it smaller? I understand you want to build, the developer wants the biggest property on the property that they can possibly get there. I totally understand that. But if it's going to encroach on the upland review area / wetlands, I mean, I'd like to see it either reduce that one on lot 2, lot 1 reduced in size and or moved further away.
If you remember from the first meeting we had the house and the garage back in this area in here. So we came around it, which pushed the house further into the upland review area. That was based on one of the commissioner's comments. Therefore, we changed the house around. We moved the house to a different footprint. Most houses that are built similar, they would have a garage on the end, but therefore we made an L-shaped house out of it. So we have a front courtyard coming into the garage, side load garage with a front courtyard. Right now with the house that we're proposing, we are at the setback lines itself on the garage corner and the house corner here. So the house really cannot be moved anymore. My client would really want to see, a 5-bedroom house. And I told him, no, we can't because of the size of the septic system. It's as big as you can get. And this is about the smallest house we can put out there relative to the building setback lines for planning and zoning.
Let's see. Okay, so just to go back on talking about the, I guess it's the nitrogen levels of 10 milligrams per liter. And I don't know if it was Steve Franklin mentioned that he thinks it's more like 16 milligrams per liter. And I wonder who came up with that. Where do those numbers come from?
Excuse me.
This is Steve Trinkus. They came from my July 30th letter, and they are based on defining the topographic area that drains across the septic system as Doug currently has it, down to both the property line and or the offsite wetland. And then it's a calculation done by a formula from the DEP manual. It looks at your rainfall. They assume 60% of the rainfall infiltrates, and it's a simple calculation of what the dilution is. Nitrogen coming out of a house is 40 milligrams per liter. Going through the septic tank, it gets reduced to 24. So you have 24 milligrams per liter going into the leaching field, and then the dilution factor should bring that down to, the 10 milligrams per liter, which is the drinking water standard. And that's the only way nitrogen is reduced in a septic system, is simply by dilution. So I calculated these. I have the DEP analysis in an Excel file. So I just plug in the drainage areas, the flow rate, i.e. the number of bedrooms, and the program spits it out in 2 seconds later. So that's where the numbers came from.
So are you saying that there's not adequate dilution?
There's not adequate dilution. The drainage area is not large enough to dilute the nitrogen from 24 milligrams per liter down to 10 or less, either at the downgradient property line or the offsite wetland boundary.
So what would you recommend to mitigate that, or is it possible to rectify that situation?
Well, the only thing the applicant has control over is the size of the house and the number of bedrooms. If you do, the number of bedrooms reduces the flow rate, which comes into play. You could still keep the length of the system if you chose to, but generally the system would be smaller. But it's simply getting the flow rate down so that the available dilution area, works to get you 10 milligrams per liter.
Okay.
Good. I'd like to make a comment about that. Mr. Trinkus is saying the only way to get reduced nitrogen is through dilution. That's not a correct statement. And here's why. I have in front of me right now, I have a letter from the state DEP dated August 8, 2008 to David Potts from Geomatrix, which is the system I'm using. David Potts has a system called Soil Air Technology. In this letter that they talk about additional reduction in nitrogen by 20% more just by adding air to the drainage, to the septic system. So air is being pumped in there, so it helps reduce the nitrogen loading as well. And also, as of the 2018 health code change that came up, there is something called the passive nitrogen reduction by the use of wood chips. I did speak with the state health department on this, and it can be done. We can add wood chips to it, which is a denitrification process, into the sand, soil, or down gradient of the system. And I did talk to Mr. Potts about this, who's from Geomatrix and the system that we're using. And yes, and that can be used, incorporated into the system to reduce that nitrogen down. So again, strictly, yes, we're using dilution through the drainage area, but you also can add the additional air to the system and reduce the nitrogen, and as well as adding wood chips per the state health code to help reduce nitrogen as well. Thank you.
The applicant, I think, for the benefit of the commission, to explain how the wood chip reduce the nitrogen levels and how it is maintained over time. I think that's information the commission needs to hear.
If I may ask, Mr. Canis, I know that you've had substantial things to say about this as well. Do you have any comment on that for the commission?
I can't speak to the new technologies that Mr. DeVet. I have heard of them. I'm not unfortunately familiar with them, so I can't speak to how that functions. But just to take a step back, with Mr. Trinkus's calculations, he calculated 16 milligrams per liter, and the calculations looked like it followed the process. The thing to remember is, though, that nitrogen thresholds really applies to systems that are within the DEP purview, which
Larger
is
systems.
7,500 gallons per day and greater. And these systems are not within that DEP purview. The concern is, in addition to the concentration, it's also really what they're getting at is the mass of nitrogen. How many pounds of nitrogen are being contributed? You could have a much, much larger system that might have a lower concentration, but in total contributes a much larger mass of nitrogen just because of the size of the system. And going back to the DPH guidelines, their position is that for the smaller systems, those less than 7,500 gallons per day, that nitrogen isn't a significant concern, and it's typically not required unless it's a densely developed lakefront area, like on Candlewood Lake, which is certainly not what we have here.
That's correct. Thank you. And it was also your opinion that that there was no impact by the proposal in this.
Right. Yeah. My opinion is that there would not. Right. That the nitrogen dilution isn't appropriate based on the DPH guidelines.
Thank you. Thank you.
So this is one, you got one house that's already there, you're proposing two properties, somebody else does it somewhere else, someone else, another, elsewhere in the town. And all of a sudden this stuff really starts adding up. And that, to me, I know it's speculative, I know it's, it's subjective, but you do live in a coastal town, and all this stuff over a period of time, maybe not right now, but as we go forward into the future, it all adds up, and it's a detriment to the environment going forward. I don't think there's any question about that on a long-term basis. So that to me is a major concern. I've walked this property quite extensively, and to me, this whole thing is just a marginal idea at best.
Okay. Michael, I know you recused, so Kelly Zitzman?
I don't have any further questions.
Bill?
No, I'm good as well. Thanks.
Okay, we want to open it up to the public?
Yeah. I think the applicant should close.
Okay, is there anybody from the public that would like to speak?
Yes, it's Dr. Christine Hamilton Hall. I'd like to speak.
Please.
As most of you know, my husband and I own the property immediately south to number 49. We live at 53 Sunswick Road. And there are a couple of issues. One, I noticed that no one really answered thoroughly the whole issue with the Caltech not being in the Darien manual that Mr. Trinkhouse brought up, and I looked in there also, and I couldn't find anywhere that the Darien manual said that was an acceptable alternative. Also, there are other things that they're proposing as theories on how they can make this work, and some of the theories that they're proposing are that you can put together, the town of Darien can put together a sprinkler system, and that we can, now the town of Darien can, I guess, set up another committee, and that committee can pay attention to whether people are abiding by what they're supposed to do or not. And then when the systems fail because they haven't been maintained properly, then the town of Darien has the right to fine these people. They've also talked about a soil air pump system that that is another item that would need meticulous maintenance or it's going to fail. And although there may not be an amount of nitrogen in this one system that's going to make a difference in our environment, when you keep pushing the limit on the environment and you keep pushing and pushing and pushing, something's going to fail. And my concern is Mr. DeVesta doesn't live on Sunswick Road. And the people who, that work for the town of Darien, a lot of the people making this decision do not live in Darien. Attorney Kaufman does not live in Darien. So there are a lot of people who do not live here that are making suggestions about how in a perfect situation, they can cram these two big houses into this little space, this minor parcel of property that has buildable land on it. And so I'm a little concerned about how that's going to affect my neighborhood and my house, as well as the homes and the yards around us. So I've noticed that when we were, the talks before this one, Mr. DeVest was on, and he was showing, he was complying with the guidelines that our town has to protect our wetlands. But other than, like, he had one disregard for the effect of the overflowing of the saltwater pools into the Holly Pond. But other than that, he was pretty good about complying with what the existing guidelines are in Darien and not trying to keep pushing the envelope to try and get this to fit. The plans for 649 Sunswick Road, they're all circumventing the guidelines to try and wedge two homes into a site that is really only suited to accommodate one relatively large home. They could put one large home in, or two very small homes. And in 5 years, Mr. DeVesta will no longer own the proposed home, and his only concern will be the risk of lawsuits. And bringing Ms. Kaufman on to speak to us about the potential lawsuits that they can bring to us if we do not comply with, or not to us, but to you, the commissioners, if we don't comply with their request, shows that they are aware of the that this can become a litigious event. So as the homeowner just south of this, my home will be the one that floods, not Mr. DeVesta's, and not the new homes that are being put up on a pedestal. Mr. Bragg's home already has a swamp behind it after every medium-sized rain, and he's going to just have a bigger swamp. The foundation of my home is going to be, I know this isn't your domain, but the foundation is going to be hurt when they start to blast around my 82-year-old home. It's going to crack and my home is going to become unstable. So by them wanting to downgrade the wetlands, there's going to be issues. Now, the photos that I sent, I hope all of you were able to look at them. I went out during the rain on July 3rd, and it was not a particularly big or long rain. But one of the things that you can see in that picture, I've never really looked at the property and it was raining before because I never had a reason to walk through forests and rocks when it was raining. But I went through to see what the rain was, and I saw that in one area, the one that was most easily accessible to me, so it's not even necessarily the widest area, it gets much wider as you get down deeper, but I couldn't walk down the hill in the rain without risking myself slipping and being injured. But on that one side, just right by my house, it was over 14 feet wide of water in that. And I did notice that now just north of me, on the north bank of that waterway, there are a lot of rocks that didn't used to be there when I moved in. And I'm not sure when all of those rocks, about this big of rocks, maybe the rocks are 8 to 12 inches large, and there's a embankment of them now on the north side of that waterway that was not there when I moved in 2003. Some of them were there, but not all of them. So now the water is being diverted more towards me and away from them, and it's over 14 feet wide, not 8. So that means that the property truly is closer to this waterway when we have just a small rain. It's not a 25-year rain, it's not a 50-year rain, it's just a regular, quick little 40-minute rain. So that's a concern to me, and I think it's a concern to, it's going to have a big environmental impact if they start adding to that area. And that concerns me. So I realize that the people that are representing the Oarsmans are not that concerned with some of the problems, and they're comfortable with some of the proposed solutions, but they're not the ones that live here. And Ms. Kaufman completed her review of this 9 days ago. We're hearing her legal description of how she sees this, and I think that it's very nice for her to go over and review for all of us who have been here since day one, listening to everything and review what we've been discussing. And it's nice of her to explain the engineering principles to all of us. But I don't think that it's appropriate that she should be telling us how that we should proceed and giving us non-enforceable instructions on how we can make this fit. It just stinks. The whole thing just seems like we're trying to get something to fit that we don't have to make this fit. I happen to know that the Oarsmans have had at least 2 reasonable offers for people who want to buy this house, fix it up, and live in it. So I don't understand why we're having to listen to ways that we can try and make this work, and things that might work and will probably not be much of a concern, and everyone can be comfortable, and we can set up new guidelines on how we're going to look after everyone and make sure they don't do this. They've come up with some new proposals, one of which is that they're going to change the pool. Well, from day one, I believe that they don't want these pools. I think that they're offering out that they want pools so that they give the, oh, I'm sorry, commissioners, okay, fine, we won't give the pools, and then this is their way, sort of their sacrificial lamb, that they're willing to give up the pools or make them smaller to appease the commission and make them feel like they've come to a resolution that's mutually agreeable. But the changes that they're making are going to have very little effect on this home, the homes that they're building, but potentially major effects on our house. And I'm asking that the EPC deny this application so that the Oarsmans can move on, negotiate with people who are not going to try and put 2 large homes in a little place where they have to mislead and everybody about where they can put things, how close things are to waterway. We won't have to work on perk tests that are used when we haven't had rain in so long that the perk tests in a drought time are going to be different than perk tests that they would do when we were in a very wet time. I know I'm not an engineer, and I know I'm not a soil expert, but it's pretty obvious that perk tests during a drought are not the same as perk tests during a wet time. And we can't rely on some heretofore non-existing tickler system that we think is going to work. And there are just a myriad of reasons why this proposal is not satisfactory, and I hope the commission just turns it down and just doesn't continue to keep this discussion going. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hamilton Hall. Is there someone else from the public that would like to speak?
Yes, this is James Bragg. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, Mr. Bragg, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just want to join with Christine Hall Hamilton Hall in her request that you deny the application. I live with my wife on 9 Peabody Lane, which is a lot whose corner abuts 49 Sunswick. Water drainage from that property regularly passes through the rear of my property. As Christine mentioned, part of my property is wetlands, which has that drainage, and so therefore I own some of the downgradient property, which we're all talking about today. I've been a resident of Darien for almost 30 years. My wife and I hope to live here for many years to come. So I have some real concerns, but I want to thank you first for the opportunity to express my concerns to the commission and all the time that you and the experts have spent on analyzing the potential impacts. But overall, for me, it sounds to me that the owners or residents are really trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. This property, it may be two acres plus, but much of it is rock and wetlands, which is what we are trying to protect in this hearing. I share the concerns that have been expressed by Mr. Trinkhaus about the impact of two large septic systems on the drainage through the back of my yard. I also share the concerns about the potential risks that two large septic systems will present in terms of the risk for potential leakage and failure into my wetlands. And I think the assertion by Attorney Kaufman that these objections are speculative, I think overlooks the substantial work which Mr. Trinkhaus has done in terms of surfacing these risks. And while I have a great respect for Mr. Canos, he does disagree with Mr. Trinkhaus, I think it's a disagreement of experts to find experts on risks which have a substantive basis. So, I think the issue that I keep hearing about is that there's still a major disagreement among experts. So at a minimum, the applicant should be required to come back again with another plan. If he's going to move the pool, okay, where is the septic tank going to go? Okay, if he's going to move the septic tank, where is that going to be? I mean, this is, I think, a very important thing that would, would help satisfy my concerns. I think, plans for smaller houses would also be more helpful. We certainly don't want to deprive the Orismans of the use of their property. However, as Christine said, it's a beautiful piece of property the way it is. For environmental reasons, I respectfully submit that it should remain as one house property. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bragg. Is there someone else from the public that would like to speak?
Hi, it's Dr. Hamilton Hall again. I just wanted to say that I just got a text from Stephanie Riggio, and she and her husband Phil have asked me to please say that they are very opposed to this proposal, and unfortunately they cannot join us because they are still relying on a long extension cord from my house to supply electricity to their house, and they do not have any internet. So they want to say that they are very concerned with this, and they feel that this is going to have a significant environmental impact on all of us, and that because the waterway does roll back down by their house as well. And I just wanted to, Stephanie asked me to please tell you that, and I also wanted to just see if anyone's going to address the questions that Mr. Trinkhaus brought up. Thank you for letting me hop in.
Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. And of course, we all wish the Ridgeos good luck in getting their electricity and getting that back. Is there someone else from the public that would like to speak?
Yes, please. This is John Delp. My wife and I, Susan Delp, live at 17 Sunslick, which is the north side of the property. And we echo what Christine and Jim have said throughout this meeting, and we appreciate the time to be able to ask some questions. And one of the two questions that I have, first is that when we put in a new septic system in Fields several years ago, and and one of the things that we were told is that the septic system needs to be 50 feet from, as well as the septic tanks need to be 50 feet from any wetlands or from any property line. And it looks like the septic tanks are in fact inside the setback. on the lot 1. And also in moving the pool, the other question, moving the pool 8 feet, like someone said earlier, that it would be within 25 feet of those septic tanks. And for someone to say that they can just, move the septic tanks, well, I know there was a lot of holes that were dug to try to find a acceptable location for those septic tanks because of all the ledge that's there. So to be able to move it that easily is not that easy. So I think there needs to be some sort of a diagram that would present that. And then lastly, again, when we put in our septic system, we were told that whenever you want to put in this new septic system, you have to identify where there would be a reserve. And I know there's a reserve location on lot 2, but I can't see the location for the reserve on lot 1. And again, I'm not a professional, so it's hard for me to see through it all. But that would be a question that I have as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Delp. Doug, would you like to answer?
Eric, I'll answer. The setback for a septic system to a property line is 10 feet for a septic tank. A leaching field, if it's in grade, if their septic system is out of grade, meaning above grade with fill, it's 15 feet. So I'm not sure where he got that, who told him about 50 feet to a property line. 50 feet to a wetlands, the wetlands are, there's no setbacks from a wetlands except for what's required by the EPC or Wetlands Commission, depending what town you're in. There is a setback of 50 feet to a water course. That can be reduced down to 25 feet if the lot was created prior to 1982. So those are the two issues there. Septic tank location, yes, the tanks can be moved around. We'll find a spot for them. Again, it's a pump system, so the tanks can be moved around. We can find a location for them if need be. The reserve area for lot 1 is just below the primary area, which I'll highlight here. Where the cursor is, right there is the reserve area for lot 1, and the reserve area for lot 2 is on the north and east side of lot 2. I think that answers his questions.
Thank you, Doug. Mr. Delp, are you satisfied with Mr. Nevesta's answers?
Well, and again, please forgive my ignorance, but the reserve area for lot 1, doesn't that put it further towards the wetlands and further into the upland review area?
Yes, it's closer to the wetlands and the upland review area, but it's a reserve area. That is only there if it need to be in the future. But typically, once you get a lot, the reserve area is required for a subdivision approval. So once a house is constructed, it gets a CO, the septic system in, they get the CO, that reserve area goes away. So that happens. The reason why they did this is because they've had problems in the past, is that if the primary gets mucked up during construction, if it's closer to a house, drive over and destroys the area, they have a reserve area to put the septic system in. But again, once the house gets a CO, the reserve area goes away. You've got a primary area to work with. In the future, years down the road, possibly decades down the road, the system does fail. You can put the septic system back in the same location. You don't need to find a new area. So that can be done as well. So again, the reserve area is closer, but it's not something that's going to be used. The primary system is going to be used, but the reserve area is there in the event that it needs to be used, potentially if there's something happens to the primary area.
Hi, I'm sorry, it's Dr. Hamilton Hall. I just have one question about what he just said. If the rule is 50 feet now, and it's 25 feet distance for lots prior to 1982, since this is a proposed subdivision, isn't this lot considered to be a 2020 lot and not a 1982 lot?
It's a water course, not a wetlands. So it's to a water course. So we don't, there's no water course. There's wetlands on the site. There's no water course.
So it being an intermittent water course doesn't count as a water course?
In my mind, no. And that's maybe Jay Fain can answer that question.
The experts, guys, what is it? How about in law, not just in your mind? I'm just asking for, because I do not know.
Mr. Fain, can you answer that question, please?
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
I'll just read, this is in my opinion, I'm just gonna read straight from Connecticut Draft General Statute, Chapter 22A. Water courses means rivers, streams, brooks, waterways, lakes, ponds, marshes, swamps, bogs, and all other bodies of water, natural or artificial, vernal or intermittent, public or private, contained within, flow through, or border upon the state, or any other portion thereof, not regulated pursuant to sections 22A, 38 to 28, 2A, 35 inclusive. Intermittent water courses shall be delineated by a defined permanent channel and bank, an occurrence of two or more of the following characteristics: evidence of scour or deposits of recent alluvium or detritus, the presence of standing or flowing water for a duration longer than a particular storm event, and C, the presence of hydrophytic vegetation. Based on my site visit of July 9th, 2020, I performed the wetland delineation, watercourse delineation on the property. And if you look at my report and you look at page 2 of the report, flags 1 through 23, I delineated as an intermittent watercourse, which is the area of that you're questioning. So I determined it to be an intermittent watercourse based on the characteristics of Connecticut General Statutes. And the other side of the property had a red maple swamp. I hope that answers your question.
Excuse me, it's Dr. Hamilton Hall again, but Mr. Fain, you also said that there was no evidence that there was ever water in the area where my 28-second video shows water flowing from on top of the.
I absolutely never made that statement.
Yes, you did at the last meeting.
No, I did not. Look carefully at the record. I said it did not meet the characteristics of an intermittent water course at upper section.
Have the vegetation consistent with that.
I definitely said. Let me finish my statement. Let me finish my statement. I don't like to be stepped on. I definitely said that water emanated from the pipe that came under the road, and I said that, and everybody has acknowledged that, including our engineer.
Is there someone else from the public?
Mr. Chairman, this is Steve Trinkus. If I could make just a couple of comments based on the ongoing discussion, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
First off, just as a clarification, Doug is correct. Septic tanks and the reserve can be 10 feet from a property line. However, when the minimum leaching system spread is required, as it is here, the system must be 25 feet from the down gradient property line, not 15. And that's from the table in the current health code that they revised in 2018. To talk about the wood chips, a very quick Google search just found a professional paper from 2017. Wood chips are used as part of what's termed a bioreactor, primarily in addressing stormwater quality, can be used for septics. However, what you have is basically a much more complicated system. You have, in addition to your standard septic tank, before you go to your pump chamber, you actually have a trickling filter, and then it goes into a bioreactor, which is where the wood chips are, and the nitrogen is reduced. But both of these are, more than a septic tank and require a lot more maintenance. Simply mixing wood chips into the select fill is going to do nothing. There was a bit of a discussion on doing effectively a trench down gradient of a system with wood chips in it. However, to get rid of nitrogen, you have to be in an anaerobic environment, which is a saturated environment. Septic systems, as a rule, especially in their initial lifetime, are aerobic systems. They, they're mostly dry. The effluent, especially in a sand system, when it comes into the system, pretty much infiltrates right into the sand. There is no ponding. Ponding only occurs once the biomat builds up on the bottom of the system and then ultimately up your sidewalls, and you get to what this health code calls long-term acceptance rate, where the biomat, which is also known by engineers as the slime layer, effectively regulates the flow of effluent from the leaching system out into the soil. Specifically regarding the geomatrix, going to their website, there is absolutely no information as to how nitrogen is reduced by this system. I've heard Mr. Potts make this claim on other projects and provide no factual evidence how to do it. Where he has used the air system on particularly restaurant systems that are under stress because of the hydraulic loading of a restaurant versus a house, the introduction of air creates a portion of the system back to aerobic from anaerobic. When you change that condition, you actually get different bacteria there. You get aerobic bacteria that will effectively eat the previous slime layer and allow effluent to disperse back out into the soil. But the system in and of itself is fingers of sand and crushed stone with no magic in it that reduces nitrogen. And again, there is nothing on the Geomatrix website that tells you how nitrogen is reduced by that system. And I think that's important for the record. And I would, appreciate the applicant answering the 3 questions that I posed early on about ensuring the maintenance of the system, what is the fill downhill of the rear Caltech system, and I forgot what my last one was, the depth of the front Caltech relative to the bottom of the test pit that Doug did. Again, as several commissioners pointed out, and as Doug pointed out in his comments, the house is shoehorned in here. You're between setback to setback. And having done land surveying years ago, even though we can draw houses to these tolerances on AutoCAD today, it is extremely difficult to build them in the field under these tolerances. Things move, even no matter how many times you stake it. So when you're building setback to setback, it is very problematic from a practical perspective. I, again, believe this is, I think, 10 pounds in a 5-gallon pail. It is a marginal area. If you also look at Google Maps of the site, I know Joe talked about, the density of, say, around Candlewood Lake. Yes, there's cottages up there. But if you also look at the aerial view of this neighborhood, there may be less houses, but they are a lot bigger. Many of them have pools. Many of them have what I would term great lawns, which, looking at Google, look like they're well fertilized. And, to follow up one of the commissioner's questions, it's a cumulative impact. And, water quality issues are not solely from one site. They build up over time, and then one day you wake up with a problem. So to be proactive and address problems before they occur is the way, in my professional opinion, a Environmental Protection Commission should evaluate projects. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Trinkus. Is there someone else who would like to speak?
Yes, I'd like to say something. It's Joe Pagliarulo.
Yes, sir.
And as far as Mr. Trinkus's idea that we cannot build within certain tolerances out in the field, everything's surveyed prior to anything going into the ground, and we can be within inches of what is on these plans. So to say that things get shifted and get moved around is just simply incorrect.
Mr. Pagliarulo. Attorney Kaufman, you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted an opportunity to respond to Mr. Trinkus and to our other neighbors. Certainly, Doug can and Jay can respond to some of his technical questions. But he just completed his statement saying, in my professional opinion, what we see here is the same that Joe just said too. It's just too much. It's too much. It's 5 pounds in a 10-pound bag. It is not, it's just not appropriate here. That's not the legal standard. And I am not coming in here threatening litigation, certainly to Dr. Hamilton Hall's point. I really joined this team in an effort to ensure that each of the standards, the regulatory and statutory standards that are required for an approval, were demonstrated to you. And I think that this record is complete in showing that. Number one, your expert concurs with our expert on nearly all points. And on the suggestions that he has made to our team for improvement, we have been able to comply with. And we spent time earlier today talking about different ways that conditions could even be drafted to allow for some post-decision modifications that would even potentially further improve the plan. I think that's a very important thing for you to consider. We've answered the questions that have been raised about challenges over the last several hearings. We satisfy all of the statutory and 10.2 regulation standard. We've affirmatively demonstrated that there will be no potential harm, and we've done that through calculations and satisfied the substantial evidence rule. We've demonstrated to you that the post-development runoff volumes will be less than the pre-development runoff volumes and what exists today. And our neighbors who may say that we are being irreverent or uncaring about this community, it's just simply untrue. Mr. and Ms. Sarsman have put in a tremendous amount of resources. They've lived here for a very, very long time. And I'm sure they would love to still be here if they could be here. But this is an opportunity that exists. This property is very unique. It's unlike other properties that we're thinking about precedent. We always think about precedent as commissioners and applicants when we put forth a plan. But the truth is that the conditions on every property are unique, and we can only look at those which apply here. So allowing a certain mitigation plan or a certain source of development here, or plan for development, is not necessarily going to be appropriate for a different property. And I think that the commission is protected in that regard going forward. Every property, its dimensions and its characteristics are entirely unique. There has been several months, several experts, and several revisions to this plan, I think, that demonstrate the sensitivity and the commitment to producing a very, very strong and feasible plan. And they've done a really good job at that. And they've delivered you a compliance application. And it is the duty of an applicant, in this case, this team, to meet the legal and regulatory standards. And you have every reason and every piece of information, detail, and evidence in your record, substantial evidence in your record, to be able to affirm this approval. However uncomfortable change may be to people in a neighborhood. We think we face that not only on this application, but multiple applications. I mean, they're the only thing they're not making more of, in the world is land, but there are zoning regulations and environmental protection regulations in place that allow for flexibility and change and for positive mitigation plans. Can that plan be sustained? It absolutely can. It's been done in this town many times before. It's been done throughout the state many times. You have a land record, you have a document with details. I'm not introducing a new system. I'm not asking for more work than that has been done before. But certainly, when an applicant and a homeowner takes on the responsibility of a new property, these are things that they do and are obligated to do by law and as part of their title. To the question about blasting, I think we answered that earlier in the call, but it is a requirement by the fire marshal to register for that permit, to register preconditions and take post blasting conditions. It's a regulatory permit requirement to ensure that there is no adverse impact that happens as part of that process. I'm trying to think if I haven't responded to other things. I know we spent quite a bit of time coming back to the nitrogen issue, we put in a lot of detail for you that this will not be an issue. The state agrees that it will not be an issue. Your expert agrees it will not be an issue. And you have, unfortunately, the hardest job here, which is to decide which direction this goes into and what you want to reasonably rely on. But I can tell you and close here tonight with certainty that the applicant has delivered you the information you need to be able to make a positive decision.
Thank you, Attorney Kaufman. Is there any other member of the public that would like to speak?
That's Dr. Hamilton Hall. I'm getting texted from all of my neighbors, and they want me to just point out that, first of all, Ms. Kaufman, I think that you did a wonderful presentation, but you cannot say that there is no risk because you do not know that. These are theories. You don't know what's going to happen with degrading of the wetlands just because you're relying on precedents and regulations. That doesn't guarantee that there's no risk. You might be doing things to try and mitigate the risk, but you are not eliminating the risk. There's a difference between no risk and mitigating the risk. And there are a lot of things here that can degrade the wetlands. And obviously blasting, but that's not an issue today, is another one of those things that will add to it further. And so I'm imploring the commission to please do the prudent and feasible alternative of denying this application for a subdivision of the and building of these two large homes and suggesting that they either not build or build smaller. Thank you.
Thank you. And while it's true that while I personally cannot demonstrate that there will be no risk or mitigated risk, I, like the commission, am relying on the substantial evidence that's been provided by our development team. And certainly the mitigated plans demonstrate that the risk is simply not there. We have not provided any speculative evidence. As I mentioned earlier, there is plenty of case law out there, and I don't offer case law as a demonstration of a potential litigation, but I offer it to you because it just shows how the standards are used in action and in practice. And where applicants have not met those standards, the denials are upheld. Where the applicants meet the standards, the commission can move to approve with confidence. We have demonstrated that this plan can be successful, that any potential impacts can be mitigated. And while this has certainly been a masterclass for all of our engineers it's been put through its paces by our neighbors, and we're respectful of that. We were respectful of that process. And worked closely with Mr. Canis and tried to be as responsive as possible to Mr. Trinkus. But we believe this application meets all the demands of the law and the local regulations and can be very successful. Thank you.
All right. I think this is getting a little repetitive at this point in time. And so what I'm going to do is, unless somebody is from the public is so moved, I'm going to ask for a motion to close the public hearing. Okay, Jim, will you put forward a motion to close the public hearing on EPC 05-2020?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do move to close the public hearing.
Thank you. Gunnar, can I have a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you. Without objection, I will consider the public hearing of EPC 05-2020 closed. Thank you for all your participation.
79.
Thank you very much.
We have
Thank you.
other do here.
You do have minutes.
We have other business. We have the minutes of July 1st, 2020. All the commission members got the.
I have Jim's comments.
Jim, of course, you never fail us. Thank you very much. Is there any other commission members that have additions?
I'm going to guess that Jim has all of mine, but I'll just go down
Send it to me.
quickly. A couple
can
of
still
them.
send
I
them to
sent
me,
them
though.
to you? Okay, then never mind.
Yeah, just see if you could
You
send
can
it
still
to,
send them to me. We
Yeah.
won't post them until, you know.
yeah, so-
Okay. Yeah, they're all just like grammar type things.
Okay.
Great. Okay, well, with that, can I have, Jim, can I have a motion to approve the minutes of July 1, 2020?
I'm happy to make a motion to approve the minutes of our prior meeting of July 1.
Hey, Gunnar, can I have a second, please?
I second that motion.
Okay, without objection, I'd like the minutes approved. Great, thank you very much. I think the next thing we're gonna do is to, adjourn. Okay, so, Jim, may I have a motion to adjourn?
To turn my microphone back on, and I move to make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting of the Environmental Protection Commission.
Great, thank you very much. Gunnar, may I have a second?
With great enthusiasm, I second that motion.
That's good enough. Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Without objection, I got a lawyer listening to me. Without objection, I consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you.